All right. Whoa, hello, it's hot. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 10th edition of the Planning Commission. If you were not here for the June 10th version of the Planning Commission, you are in the wrong place. Want to call us to order, and and first I'll start with if there are any outside of Eli, or Commissioner Spivak, who's eating, any items of interest from commissioners? Okay, and I want to recognize who is in the room. I don't see anyone that we have online, but we have Commissioners Wade Lang, Eli Spivak, Vice Chair O'Mara, myself, Chair Routh, Vice Chair Thompson, and Commissioner Ames. And now Director Diefender for the director's report.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Thank you so much. Welcome today. Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. Just wanted to provide a few brief updates for the commission. First update is, as you know, we've been conducting a recruitment to fill the soon-to-be vacancies on the Planning Commission, and that process is in its final stages. We are awaiting the committee meeting of the City Council. The appointments will go to the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee of the City Council. We had a date for this week that unfortunately got bumped, and so the appointments are expected to be at the committee in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks Thursday, which would be June 26th. So information about the appointments, further information about the appointments will be forthcoming. So that is in progress, and we're happy to report that. Another piece of news that I wanted to share is that you all may recall, as the commission last year, we had the three amigos. We fondly called them. One of the amigos was the Housing Compliance Code Project, which was a project to bring the city's code into compliance with SB 1537, which was a state law that is actually temporary law. It was a temporary law that required cities to create a by right path for adjustments for a number of different provisions of the code on a temporary basis for housing projects. That bill had an option for cities. So cities could either implement the bill directly, the statute, or cities could seek to have an exemption from that way of implementing it and use their existing processes to implement if they could demonstrate that adjustments were granted 90% or more of the time. So as you all know, the city took the approach of updating the code so that we could use our existing adjustment processes to review those requests and review and grant those requests. Unfortunately, we got word a couple weeks ago that the state denied our exemption. And what that means for the city is that the Bureau, the Portland Permitting and Development Bureau will have to implement the statute directly, effective immediately. So someone can come in and ask to have an exemption, an adjustment through the state bill anytime at this point. And it would have to be processed through a limited legislative review process that is a process that's outlined in state statute. So just wanted to share a little bit the reasons for the denial as expressed in the communication from DLCD was that the city, there was some commentary around the fact that the city, while changing the code to allow the adjustments that were among the 10 or so provisions that the state bill said should be adjusted, the fact that we still had prohibitions to some adjustments, even though they weren't the topic areas governed by the bill, that still led them to conclude that we were not in compliance with the state law. And it's more complicated than that, but that's like the short story. And I think furthermore, the office, the DLCD, had some issues with the testimonial letters that were submitted, because that exemption process, one of the ways that you can seek to pursue that exemption process is by providing testimonials from developers that they have in fact gone through the process and they find the process to be reasonable, and that, and so there was some sort of contention that the testimonials were not always from developers themselves. Some of them were from architects or people who represent developers in processes that they go through with the city. Nonetheless, that was a determination that was made. And also there were letters of, so DLCD did have a comment period as well on the city's request for exemption. And in that time, there were letters of opposition that were submitted to DLCD by housing developers. And I think the combination of those factors led them to essentially deny the city's request. So the city is working now to quickly update forms and create processes to implement the statute directly. So just wanted the commission to know that, because that is a project that the commission worked on. Also, just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that this is the second to the last meeting of this commission in its current form. We have a number of commissioners who will be leaving the commission as of June 30th. We will have opportunity at the next meeting to make a little bit of pomp and circumstance around that. So, and we, as you know, we have a social scheduled for after the meeting. And I just wanted to tell you all that I regret that I will not be here in person for that last meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that in advance. I will be out of town. So I will join, as it stands right now, I will join the meeting, but I obviously will not be able to join the happy hour afterwards. So just wanted to let you know about that. And on that note, as you know, there's a social hour after the June 24th Planning Commission meeting. I presume you'll receive more information from staff on that, but we are going to meet at Hotel Zags at their new restaurant, which the address is 515 Southwest Clay Street, but I'm sure you don't have to remember that. I'm sure we'll send you some follow-up information on that. So I think that concludes my director's report right now. Happy to answer any questions you might have, and also happy to cede back to you, Chair, so we can go on with the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Points of clarification? Yeah, Commissioner Spivak.
Well, thank you. I'd like to appreciate the city for seeking that exemption from 1537, and at least one letter was from a developer because I wrote it. I think that it's disappointing that the state of Oregon used that mechanism. I like the intent of that bill, but to require cities to do automatic adjustments is just a really weird way for the state to intervene for a good goal. I have one question, and maybe it's not the time to ask the question yet, but there's a DLCD RFP coming out really soon, due in early August, for cities to get technical support, staffing, I think, to do code projects. And I thought, I was on a DLCD call, and they mentioned this, and I thought if the city could let us know what they're going to apply for. The expectation is Portland will be applying. I'd be curious to know.
Sorry, Commissioner Spivak, what did you say the expectation is, or is
Well,
it?
this is a DLCD funding
Yes.
round coming up
Yes.
to fund jurisdictions to do housing production strategies and other
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And I was guessing that Portland is going to be submitting something for it, and I thought I'd ask, since we got you here, if we know if we're doing it.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're still evaluating what we might submit for, but yes, I think we have recently applied for DLCD grants that are, the intent is to facilitate housing production and projects that facilitate housing production. And the grant, we received 2 grants. Why am I'm spacing out? One of them was to do the preliminary infrastructure analysis for the Inner East project, which is one of the actions in the housing production strategy. And for the life of me, right this second, I'm not remember. Oh, no, I do remember. Thank you. The other was to provide some funding for the housing bonus project that we are also, which was an action in the housing production strategy and is a action that the staff in BPS are currently working on, and that is to calibrate the bonuses in the code in the multi-dwelling and mixed-use zones to encourage more family-size units and accessible units. So those are two projects that we have had funding for from that, essentially that more or less that same stream of funding. And this is the next phase, and we do intend to submit for probably one or two projects, but we're still figuring out exactly what that is. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Thompson.
Can you remind us what the timeframe was for the state bill and the temporary nature of that?
Yes, I believe that was through 2032. Yes, I'm seeing some affirmative nods in the audience. So yes, so if you recall, the city did the housing regulatory relief project, which suspended for a certain amount of time some regulations, also with the goal of facilitating housing production. The local ordinance suspended those regulations through 2029, whereas the state law is suspending their bundle of regulations through 2032.
Is the city planning to go back with an updated exemption proposal, or just?
There is no plan at this time to reapply for exemption. We're just going to implement the statute directly.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Thoughts? Okay. And on the 24th, we'll just have to FaceTime you in, Patricia. Thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda. Is that correct?
Pardon me, Chair Routh. My mistake. I was counseled that I forgot one thing on the director's report. My apologies. And that is to just get a head nod confirmation from commissioners about the USB letter, the Urban Service Boundary Amendment. So if I could just get a confirmation that everyone was good with the letter that was distributed. Perfect. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Cool. Thank you. Moving on to consent agenda, which is consideration of the April 8th minutes. Would anyone like to move to adopt?
So moved.
Thank you, Chair O'Meara, or Vice Chair O'Meara. And second, Commissioner Alexander, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving right along to the code alignment project. And so this is a briefing and a hearing with the possibility of a recommendation. Already coming up. Thank you very much. Welcoming Mika Keenan and Morgan Tracy. And forgive me, Daniel Gleason from Urban Forestry. Thank you very much we'll have a brief presentation from staff and then follow with the public hearing. So I'll turn it over, commend it to your care, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a minute. Okay, thank you everyone for hearing this item on your agenda today. My name is Mika Keenan. I'm a project manager with the Permit Improvement Team, and the Permit Improvement Team is situated in the Community and Economic Development Service Area. So we are not affiliated with any one specific bureau. Rather, our team supports all of the bureaus that are involved with permitting. I'm here today with Morgan Tracy, who is a senior planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and Dan Gleason, who is a coordinator with Parks Urban Forestry. So the proposal that we're going to review with you today is a legislative project that proposes to amend 4 city titles by temporarily pausing upgrade requirements until January 1st, 2029, a little over 3 years. Today, we are asking that this commission recommend that the city council adopts the this commission adopts the code alignment project proposed draft and amends Title 33 Planning and Zoning as described in the code alignment project proposed draft. We're also asking that this commission provide feedback to the Urban Forestry Commission to amend Title 11 trees as described in the proposed draft and as amended by the staff memo dated May 30th, 2025, which you all should have received. So for our agenda today, I'm going to get us started with the project overview. Morgan is going to walk through the proposed amendment to Title 33, the zoning code. Dan is going to walk us through the updates to Title 11 trees. We will then hear public testimony and then have commission deliberation. So the regulatory challenges permitting customers face have been raised by several sources over many years. Multiple city audits, council resolutions, customer and staff surveys, and a housing survey have all have a consistent message that we need to address our code barriers to improve permitting, that there is not necessarily an issue with any one code, rather it's the cumulative impact of regulations that create barriers to an efficient and effective permitting system. Regulations that govern our built environment often overlap. They can be inconsistent across codes. They sometimes conflict, either as written or as applied, and this leads to a lack of transparency and predictability. These are all the issues that staff and applicants are left to untangle, often after the permit is already under review. These regulatory obstacles can lead to unexpected costs for applicants, delays, frustration, and in some cases, projects being abandoned altogether. This project is the first step in addressing this cross-code regulatory problem. We launched the Code Alignment Project in November 2024, just 7 months ago, with the intent of bringing a code amendment package to council this summer. In December 2024, 1 month after the project launched, we published the first news article in the Plans Examiner. We subsequently published additional articles in the BPS monthly newsletter, and project updates were sent to city listservs periodically over the last 7 months. Combined, these news outlets have approximately 4,000 subscribers. We have reviewed the proposal with 2 city advisory committees to date, sent out public notices to almost 1,000 people, and we also provided additional information to special interest groups offering to meet with individuals or groups to share more about the project and receive feedback. The process and scope of these amendments is a little different than your typical code package. It's a new approach to code development that takes a holistic look at our regulations across bureaus with the intent of simplifying policies by bringing them closer into alignment. Typically, one bureau proposes changes to one code to advance the mission of their individual bureau. The Code Alignment Project takes a cross-functional approach to evaluate code improvements from a city perspective, which is reflective of our new form of government. The project team consists of both policy and implementation staff from across the development-related bureaus that you see listed on the left side of your screen. We asked this project team to work differently on this project. We focused specifically on how to create more consistent and predictable requirements. We asked them to iterate and adapt as they learned more about each bureau's codes and to evaluate how the codes could better align to work together and provide a seamless, well-integrated regulatory framework. The team thought holistically about how we can create alignment for improved service delivery, and we focused on outcomes specifically for small businesses and small project types, recognizing that this applicant pool is often less resourced to hire professionals to help them through complicated codes and permitting reviews. With the project team and guiding principles in place, we began to narrow down a scope of work. We started with a list of 100 existing issues that had been identified by customers and staff. Out of that list of 100, we found that 80 were not actionable, meaning there was no specific identified problem. Some required major policy changes or only involved Title 33 changes, which were already being addressed by RECAP or other BPS projects. And still others focused on process or technology improvements, such as expanding project docs or the permitting review system. The remaining 20 issues fell into two categories: code conflicts and cost thresholds. The team quickly aligned around cost thresholds, identifying them as a significant pain point for customers. Cost thresholds are triggers that when a project meets or exceeds a certain dollar amount, the city requires the applicant to make improvements to their building and/or their site. These are often not included as a project's original scope of work. There are several challenges with Portland's cost thresholds that the project team identified. They're spread across several codes, making them hard to find, and they are based on the cost of the project, also known as the project valuation. It can be challenging to gain agreement between staff and the permit applicant on exactly what that project value is. Cost thresholds are different for each code. Some are flat numbers, some change every year, while others remain static. Still, another improvement threshold uses a formula based on the assessed value of a property. The improvement requirements often come as a surprise to applicants who may not learn about them until they submit for their permit. They can add significant costs to projects and delays. Additionally, when we researched peer cities, we found that upgrade requirements were typically based on the type of work proposed rather than the cost of a project. So Portland is an outlier in this regard. The intended outcomes for this project are to create consistency across 4 codes for upgrade requirements, to help close the economic feasibility gap for small businesses and small project types. As you know, these projects are having a hard time right now getting off the ground, and also to simplify permitting processes, improve regulatory transparency, and permit predictability. I also want to add that the project team considered several options to bring these thresholds into alignment, but found that making even minor adjustments quickly led to the need for a deeper analysis and additional data collection to develop a long-term solution. As such, we're proposing to pause the regulations for about 3 years to allow time for this analysis, as well as provide much economic relief for Portland businesses. It is one solution that addresses these 2 existing challenges. So again, before I hand this off to Morgan and Dan, who are going to go into the details of the proposal, these are the 4 codes that we are proposing to suspend. During this pause, the bureaus will continue to work on a long-term code solution. This commission will make the recommendation to City Council on 1 amendment proposed to Title 33 and a recommendation to the Urban Forestry Commission on the proposed amendments to Title 11. So again, non-conforming upgrades for Title 33, street tree planting for Title 11, except for new buildings and street improvements. Street tree planting continues to apply in those situations. Frontage improvements for Title 17 are proposed to be suspended except for trip increases and institutional uses and seismic evaluation reports under Title 24. And now I'll hand it over to Morgan.
There we go. Thanks. Thanks, Mika. So for the record, Morgan Tracy, he, him pronouns, senior planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I'll be covering the amendments to Title 33, which are fairly surgical. Next slide. Okay. So just to get us grounded, the non-conforming upgrade requirement is triggered for projects with a value of more than $356,000. It's intended to bring sites that were built under prior codes up to date with modern code requirements for things such as landscaping and trees, better delineated pedestrian circulation systems, and bike parking. Applicants must spend up to 10% of the project cost on bringing these items up to date if they are not already. Just a note here, you have received testimony that speaks to an option 2, so I just want to take a moment and explain what that is. This option allows applicants to enter into an agreement to defer constructing the upgrades for between 2 and 5 years based on the size of the site. But in these cases, that 10% cap no longer applies, and the site must be brought fully up to conformance by the end of the time period. So it's just another alternative way of meeting that upgrade requirement, but there's a trade-off to be considered in that second option. We are not disputing the benefit of these upgrade requirements, but there can be a number of unintended additional costs or delays or types of projects that one would not normally expect these requirements to apply to, such as a tenant improvement in a multi-tenant strip mall like this in the picture, or, next slide, a daycare upgrade, for example. So here, in this example, there's a vacant space being reconfigured into a daycare with classrooms, additional bathrooms, and an indoor play area. Because this project is valued at $400,000, up to $40,000 extra must be spent bringing aspects of the site up to conformance. In addition to the cost of the upgrades themselves, there are other cost implications, such as delays from responding to the initial check sheets for missing those non-conforming upgrades. Analyzing the non-conforming upgrade requirement for a small site can cost for a consultant can be between $5,000 and $15,000. Additionally, redoing site plans to show loss of some or all of the parking spaces to accommodate required landscaping and pedestrian walkways, impacts to floor plans to accommodate long-term bike parking, hiring of additional contractors to excavate and install landscaping or pave areas that weren't paved previously. Additionally, if there's not enough room to install the required landscaping or bike parking or some other requirement due to the site constraints, the applicant would need to submit for an adjustment. Adjustments cost around $5,000 plus any cost to prepare that application, as well as add 2 to 3 months for the permit review while that decision is pending. We have heard from PP&D, the Portland Permitting and Development Review staff, that applicants for these smaller projects can often decide to abandon their permit, either until they can renegotiate with the property owner, find an alternative site, or reduce the project scope until the project falls below that project valuation threshold. Next slide. So I mentioned the rather surgical nature of this amendment. So we are following the lead of the Housing Regulatory Relief Project that was passed in 2024. This amendment would revise the text in 33278-070D2 to broaden the current pause on nonconforming upgrades that apply to residential projects would now apply to all projects until that January 1st, 2029 date. Based on a look back at 5 years of commercial permits for additions and alterations, we anticipate that roughly 70 sites per year, or about 8% of the total, would be impacted by this one part of the 4-part suspension proposal Mika described earlier. What this number doesn't account for are the projects that applicants potentially walked away from because of the additional costs and complexities for meeting the upgrade requirement. So while this change is pretty small in terms of the proposed changes in code language, the impact of small-scale projects and businesses could be quite impactful. And I'll pass it to Dan.
Thank you, Morgan. For the record, Daniel Gleason, he, him pronouns, coordinator with City of Portland Urban Forestry. In this section, I'm going to go over the changes outlined in the Urban Forestry Commission memo. Morgan walked you through Amendment A already. Amendments C and E are very technical in nature, so I won't be covering these unless there's questions that arise. So I'll be focusing on Amendment B, D, and F. Amendment B is to waive the tree plan requirements on specific types of building permit. Currently, tree plans are required to be submitted whenever there is regulated trees either on site or along the street. The purpose of this plan is to identify where the trees are, which trees are requested to be removed as part of the project, which trees are required to be preserved and protected, and to show where new trees can be planted. We've received feedback that this requirement can be overly burdensome as part of the permit application and review process for projects which are exempt from street tree planting requirements and where there is not proposed exterior work that could damage the existing trees. This amendment would waive the requirements for a tree plant in these scenarios. Amendment D is a temporary change to when street trees are required to be planted through development projects. Currently under Title 11, any new construction, additions, or alteration development projects that are valued at more than $25,000 require that the project bring street frontages up to street tree density. This requires a street tree review P as part of the building permit and involves that Portland Permitting Development tree inspector assess the project's right-of-way and look to see if it can accommodate new street trees. If there is room for street trees, the applicant must incorporate these new trees into the building plans and plant the trees as part of the project. This proposal would be to exempt additions and alterations from the planting requirements, but also remove the $25,000 threshold for roughly 3 years. During that time, new building constructions would still trigger street tree planting requirements, as would projects where PBOT is requiring frontage improvements. New building construction captures most large developments, and alterations and additions are typically smaller projects, such as finishing a basement, remodeling a kitchen, or updating a commercial space for a new tenant. These are often interior work only, where no site work or ground disturbance happens. This example can be used to demonstrate existing code requirements and what the proposed changes could look like. Currently, to meet the requirements for a project like this alteration, the owner would need to create a tree plan as part of their building permit. They would need to show all of the street trees in the right-of-way and on site, including the size of the trees, and identify where new street trees could be planted following the city's street tree planting standard specifications. If they were unable to create this tree plan themselves, the applicants would sometimes need to hire an arborist or an architect to create a tree plan, which can cost anywhere between $2,000 and $2,500 for a small site. For projects like this, we have heard that the tree planting requirements often are surprising and are not intuitive to the property owners. They often first learn they will have to have a tree plan and plant street trees in the city review process after they have submitted their project plans. This often adds time to the permit review and unexpected cost of the project. This amendment would not require street tree planting or a tree plan for projects like this. I want to ensure that we are not downplaying the importance of tree planting as creating critical city infrastructure through development. However, also want to recognize option for adding this infrastructure has changed since Title 11 went into effect. This table shows annual plantings through city programs in orange as opposed to development requirements for additions, alterations, and new construction. Under this proposal, additions and alterations would be paused, while trees would continue to be planted for new construction, although likely at a lower rate than the past 10 years. Conversely, street tree planting by the city will increase significantly over the next 3 years. Thanks to PSEF, the city has significantly more street tree planting capacity than in the past, and this type of programmatic planting also ensures that trees are planted in the high priority areas of the city. The last proposed amendment I will cover is to 11.60, which is the technical requirements sections of Title 11. Currently, trees planted under permits must meet tree size requirements, which are established in this chapter. For street trees, they need to be 1.5-inch caliper and up to 2.5-inch caliper based on the zoning. So smaller trees can be planted in residential areas where more commercial and industrial sites require larger trees. For on-site trees, the tree requirement is 1.5-inch caliper. This proposed amendment would allow the city forester, through an administrative rule process, to reduce the tree caliper size planting requirements. This amendment is proposed as part of an effort to make it easier to meet the Title 11 requirements and to help facilitate increased tree planting through the city by easing tree stock requirements. The administrative rulemaking process includes opportunities for public involvement, including a 30-day public comment period.
So in conclusion, our proposal is to simplify permitting and support small businesses and small project types by suspending 4 upgrade requirements until January 1st, 2029. Although one code or requirement may be tempting to adjust or change, the goal and purpose of the project is really to align requirements across the codes to create consistency. Staff proposes the Planning Commission recommend that City Council adopts the code alignment project proposed draft, amends Title 33 Planning and Zoning as described in the code alignment project proposed draft. Staff also proposes the Planning Commission provide feedback to the Urban Forestry Commission to amend Title 11 trees as described in the proposed draft and is amended by the staff memo dated May 30th, 2025. This concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have before we move to public testimony.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Before we go to public testimony, any questions for clarification? Commissioner Ames?
Commissioner Ames, for the record. I mean, is this the time when we're asking any questions that we've got? Yeah, okay, great. Question about, is it limiting at all that we just looked at small projects by small companies? I mean, was there, and I guess how was that approach determined, I guess. I mean, I think at this point, I don't think we should discriminate against the size of the project. I think, would want any project in the city of Portland. And was that a limiting factor in the team's analysis by just looking at small projects?
Thank you, Commissioner Ames. We decided to focus on small businesses and small project types because that is typically an applicant pool that isn't directly considered. However, what we learned throughout the project is that the net effect of these proposed amendments will benefit large-scale development types as well. So it actually wasn't a limiting factor. It was just the initial lens we applied. But like I said, the outcome will benefit large-scale development projects as well.
Okay.
Did you want to add to that?
I was just going to reinforce that statement, just say that the pauses they don't differentiate between small and large projects. They apply uniformly.
Board, yeah, okay. Couple more questions. Let's see. I guess, so there's an expiration date on some of these changes, is that right? And I guess why not just change them indefinitely? I guess requiring a tree plan for somebody who's trying to build out their basement seems a little ridiculous, but is there an opportunity to change these code amendments indefinitely?
Yeah.
Yeah, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. Just want to clarify that as Mika noted, each of these requirements to do an analysis to figure out what that long-term permanent regulation change should be, that really was something that was going to take much longer and would require additional outreach. And so I think you can think of this project as, in some ways, similar to the Housing Regulatory Relief Project, kind of a very near-term intervention with the goal of evaluating, what the outcomes are after some time with these interim regulations, and then thinking about how that should inform the change in permanent regulations, much in the way that we kind of characterize what we're doing with the Housing Regulatory Relief Project. So each of these, as Mika said, try to figure out what is the right threshold, whether it's cost or something else, and how do you do that in a way that starts to align across the codes. That was something that was going to take a little bit more time to investigate and figure out. And we're trying to also give some relief in the short term. So this was the way to thread that needle.
Okay, so there's, I guess that was my last question, are there more recommendations coming from this group? I'm sure it's ongoing and, so I guess, do we see another kind of set of proposed code amendments from this group to accomplish the goal?
The proposal is that the bureaus will continue to work on this specific code amendment package and bring forward to City Council and to this commission a more permanent long-term change by January 1st, 2029. If that proposal does not come forward for whatever reason, the way that the code is structured, it would revert to the requirements that are in place today.
Got it. I think that's all. And also thanks for working on, it's super important in the city. I work for a general contractor and we see it all the time with developers that we work with to go through this. So appreciate it.
Other questions for clarification?
Vice Chair O'Mara, for the record, I have a question about the pedestrian improvements, specifically in front of commercial spaces. Really appreciate the example you provided around the childcare, the tenant improvement project. So for improvements that are needed for accessibility, would that be looked at separately? I'm thinking about sidewalks in front of a commercial space that have not been upgraded for accessibility standards. How would those be viewed? Would they be exempt as well?
That's a simple question with a complicated answer, and I apologize in advance. We differentiate between what happens in the right-of-way and what happens on the site. Title 17 addresses the sidewalk improvements and ADA curb ramps, and that's a separate part of this proposal, which is handled a little bit differently. and how that is affected by the proposal depends on certain factors related to trip generation. So that's kind of different. When we move on to the site, the non-conforming upgrades require connections between the main entrance and the public right-of-way. And when they are constructed, they have to be constructed to ADA standards. If a developer is providing an ADA compliant ramp, one of the things that the current code considers is we don't include that project, that the value of that part of the project in that overall project threshold. So there's a little bit of consideration there. But what this pause would mean is if someone was not proposing to improve that connection and they're otherwise not required by the state building code to do so, that would not happen. That connection wouldn't happen, at least until the next round of improvements sometime in the future.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Anything else? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Spivak.
If there is an improvement inside a building, like the childcare example, I'm guessing there will not be tree protection requirements because there's no tree survey. You don't know which trees are oversized. But on the other hand, people still have to follow the rules about cutting trees and permits for that. Is that accurate?
I'll just speak a little loudly. There you go. Yeah, that's accurate. So even if a formal tree review is not required, the code requirements to protecting and not impacting those trees would be still part of the process and would go through a communication to the applicant as part of the building permit final product given to them.
Yep. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. We will proceed to a public hearing, and thanks to everyone for your patience. We have 4 folks all in person, so thank you for showing up in person. How about let's do it 2 at a time so no one's alone. Chris Smith and Lee Armstrong. Oh, I'm sorry, and prior to that, any disclosures from commissioners on this? I will disclose that I actually had a conversation previously with Chris Smith, and also this morning asked Zachary Lauritsen from Oregon Walks if they were planning to provide testimony, because I knew that they had had a conversation with Yalmika, and the contents of that are of those conversations are memorialized pretty much in the map app. So thank you very much. Chris. Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Lang.
I should just, Wade Lang for the record. Some of the outreach was done through BOMA, and I am on paid staff of BOMA, so. And I was part of some of that conversation too.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Chris, take it away.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Chair Routh, members of the commission. I'm Chris Smith, and I am not wearing any of my organizational hats today. I'm here as an individual bicycle advocate and sustainable transportation advocate. And I'm supportive of the goals of the Code Alignment Project. Streamlining our code is important for a variety of reasons. But I am concerned about cumulative impacts to bicycle parking. This is one more place where bicycle parking requirements will get reduced. Just to remind you, a couple years ago in the Housing Regulatory Relief Project, you took down the maximum ratios in the densest part of Portland from 1.5 to 1.0. You also impacted the in-unit standard, which I'll come back to because I think that's the key point here. The state law changes were mentioned today. Portland did not get an exemption. That means that a developer can request an adjustment down to 0.5. So the same bike parking standard that would apply in rural Oregon would apply in Portland. And they can put that parking anywhere in the building, which means it could be 100% in unit. Which brings me back to an ask we made during housing regulatory relief that hasn't been met yet. As part of housing regulatory relief, well, going back even further, 2019, when we last reformed the bike parking code, We grappled with the in-unit standard because we had a standard that we knew was not effective, the hook on the wall standard. We attempted a standard around alcoves for bikes that clearly turned out not to be practical. Don't object that you removed that, but you didn't replace it with anything. So we reverted to an ineffective standard. And now that even more bike parking could be in unit, I think it's particularly important that you get around to doing that. And I'm here today to request that you take that on in recap 11. I have been working with an architect and a representative of the bike parking industry to try and come up with what we think would be a relatively simple and durable solution for in-unit parking. Would love an opportunity to work with staff on that and get something into the recap 11 proposed draft. So I hope you will be supportive of that request. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a Lee Armstrong in the house? Okay. Who looks very much like Sarah Radcliffe. And could we also have Curtis Reistad? And you each, I should have mentioned, get 3 minutes. When you are at 30 seconds, you will get this lovely, professionally done Post-it. Thank you. Please, Sarah.
My name's Sarah Radcliffe, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for Habitat for Humanity. I think there I am. Okay. Sarah Radcliffe with Habitat for Humanity, Portland Region. So first, I'll just apologize. As part of the memo, Title 17 street improvements seemed like it was part of this package. I think it may not be, and so we may be a little off topic, but if it's allowable, I'd like to go ahead and just kind of daylight the issue that we had wanted to raise around street improvements. So we appreciate the intent of the package and the work that went into it. Public improvements, like big picture, is one of the largest and least predictable components of Habitat for Humanity's developments. We're doing generally 8 to 50 unit attached townhomes, middle housing. There's a lot of street improvements involved. And specifically, what we had hoped to talk about is public roads. Habitat currently has two future developments and one current development that will require us to finance a new public road. These are in Southwest, North, and East Portland. And that requires us to add sidewalks, curb cuts, lighting, street parking, bioswales, swales, street trees. Sometimes these costs are really pretty huge. Sometimes these projects make sense for the existing residents and for new residents and can be folded into the cost of a larger project, but sometimes the one-size-fits-all approach can lead to really exorbitant public improvements that don't really benefit anyone. For example, Habitat in the last couple of years has turned down free land at least twice after learning that a small development would trigger a requirement to build a brand-new public road. And currently, the city is requiring us to build a public road that leads to a dead end in a Habitat housing development in Hillsdale. And the excavation and retaining wall requirements that come along with a public road add roughly $1.25 million to the total project cost. Basically, we just wanted to highlight this tension between housing production and improving the existing street grid and ask for some flexibility and to tailor those requirements to the project site. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
My name's Curtis Reistad. I'm a third generation Portland, Oregon. My dad went to Lincoln High School, that's now part of Portland State. I went to Lincoln High School and I graduated from Portland State. And I desperately care about seeing city and the area thrive. I had an enlightenment point at that age when you realize mortality is going to set in and I only have so many years left on this planet. And I want to spend my time helping the city and the region do better. We have a housing crisis. I want to be part of the solution. 2 years ago, you may or may not know, I proposed a 30-story affordable housing tower downtown. I was rejected. I spent the next year and a half with attorneys and meeting every city councilor, commissioner, the previous board, and last October they voted in and gave a 5-year memorandum on a height restriction. I never wanted a zone change. It was strictly a house overlay. I believe I have the ability to make that project happen. I've completed a LEED Platinum 99 on 99th and Gleason. It's the first 8-story mass timber building. It reduces the energy used for heating by 52%. It promotes our biggest export, which is lumber. And I'm asking the city, or the councilors here, when that got voted in, they raised the height restrictions, but they didn't talk about FAR. I assumed that FAR would be increased also. Otherwise, it'd make no sense, the voting of the increase of height. So I had that question for everyone here. And if not, I've already talked to some commissioners. They're in favor of that also. And I'm only talking about affordable housing. I'm not interested in making it easier for people to build towers in South Waterfront or in the Pearl District where rent's $4,000 a month. I'm talking about the working class people that make a city thrive. That is who I'm interested in helping. And I want to do it in a way, in a manner that protects our environment. That's important to me as a Portland Oregonian. Back in '73, we passed the bottle bill. I still remember cutting my foot walking on the beach with those peel cans, if you guys are old enough. And the other thing is I hear a lot about your streamlining of permits. That's very important because the standard AIA contract makes the developer responsible for any delays. And unfortunately, what contractors do is they will blame the city and then they'll add to the time of the contract. So the developer has to incur the cost of holding and additional general conditions. So if there would be a time frame when for any permits that we could go forward if the city has not responded. That's why you're seeing a lot of developers pull out of the city of Portland. They don't want to take that risk.
Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. And I believe with that, that ends our hearing. So we're going to formally close both oral and written testimony. Really appreciate you coming here. And with that, would love to open for discussion. Commissioner Spivak.
I'll start off with a question from written testimony received. There was a comment from Amy Peterson, and I think someone else as well, about sites with existing non-conforming upgrade covenants and whether these proposed changes could apply to those as well, give them more of a longer time window. And I didn't track this closely, but it was an interesting question because someone from the project team, I didn't raise this earlier because I thought maybe there was testimony from those folks, but
Yeah.
I'll just raise it directly.
Thank you, Morgan.
I'll jump in. For the record, Morgan Tracy, Senior Planner, BPS. Thanks for the question, Commissioner Spivak. So what you're referring to in the testimony was what I described as the option 2 upgrade alternative for meeting your non-conforming upgrades. Option 2 involves basically an applicant can come in and make a decision at the point where they are told they need to make certain upgrades to either propose those upgrades with the current permit or enter into a covenant, which is essentially a contract or agreement with the city, to make all the required upgrades in a deferred time period. So rather than make them with that current permit, you get a 2 to 5 year length of time to make the full extent of the required upgrades. I just taking a step back on this question about what to do with the permits that are in flight. So typically when we adopt a code, the goalpost rule is basically everything that comes in after that code is adopted are subject to those requirements at the time that they apply. With the housing regulatory relief project, there was a provision that was added at City Council that allowed some back-looking for permits that had been submitted and not finalized within a time period to still take advantage of the changes that were included in that project. We are anticipating a similar sort of approach for City Council, but we have not worked out the fine details of that. There's multiple sort of logistical challenges that kind of need to be figured out, not just for non-conforming upgrades, but for public works permits and tree plans and so forth. It is something we are considering, but the non-conforming option 2.1 is a little bit challenging from another aspect, which is this contractual agreement that has already been recorded on the property. So we haven't figured out the mechanics of that yet. So in a way of not a full, complete answer, it is in our windshield, but we haven't resolved that one yet fully. And we will address that with our recommendation, the full recommended package to State Council and the ordinance.
That's helpful. And I guess with some recorded agreements, it says the recorded agreements like second kitchens or bathrooms, it says unless the code's changed at the end, which might be an opening for that. One other, in response to Habitat's testimony, I think that I recognize that we're not the recommending body on Title 17, part of this package. I was part of the recap, so we had a little briefing on, but even at that point, there was just a 2-page PowerPoint. I'm guessing it's not been written yet. But I'm curious whether Title 17 is going to council on the same schedule as this project, and if so, if there's a way we can provide input to those people who gave us testimony on Title 17, what their next opportunity is to provide testimony, because I think they recognize that this is not the body for it, but I don't know whether there's some other body that's going to see it before it goes to council, or whether it's just a council, or there's a council subcommittee. I don't know, but that might be a helpful educational component with our new form of government structure.
Patricia Diefendorfer, I can just jump in and say, yes, the reason that Title 17 amendments are not in the purview of the Planning Commission, they will be part of the package that goes to the full council. With our new form of government, all items that go to council go to a committee. It's most likely, in this case, would be, although the council president makes the determination on which committee items go to. It's most likely the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee. It is? Okay, thank you. So that's where the input testimony can be provided there at that forum on that. If this commission wants to provide some thoughts in the transmittal letter for the component of the project that is within the Purviews Commission, I think we can certainly talk about that. But I think there was some maybe confusion about what was actually being proposed as it relates to the Title 17. So I don't know if it's helpful. Morgan, tell me if it's appropriate, but I'm looking to you to maybe just explain a little bit more about what actually is being proposed with Title 17, because I think there might be some misunderstanding of that.
You bet. So the Title 17 amendment, which hasn't been formally written yet, that will be incorporated in the next draft. We're working with our colleagues in PBOT to develop that specific language, but the objective of that language is to, when it comes to street improvement upgrades, there are two types of requirements that apply. One is when a project increases the trip generation on a site. So you're going from like an office use to a retail restaurant. So relatively low number of trips to a lot of people coming and going to the site. That trigger will continue to apply irrespective of this proposal. The second requirement that gets triggered is when there's more than 35% of the assessed value of the improvements on the site is being expended on the project. So for example, if the assessed improvements on a site were $100,000 for the building, and the project was spending more than $35,000 in the building, that would flip the switch, and PBOT would look at that project for sidewalk and curb improvements. The proposal would suspend that trigger for everything except for institutional uses, schools and hospitals, namely. So if that helps, That was the proposal. The language still needs to be crafted to do that.
Sorry, Commissioner Lang, and then Vice Chair Thompson.
Just one quick question on that trigger, and I'm going by memory, so forgive me. But was mechanical improvements exempt from that at one time? Is it still?
Now I'm going off memory. I'm not totally sure. There are a number of excluded parts from that project valuation that are baked into all of these upgrades, and another aspect that's not consistent, frankly. I'm not sure if that specific mechanical improvements was part of the exclusions for street improvements, but that we are not touching what's excluded from project valuation, if that's of any comfort.
Thank you.
Yep.
Erica Thompson, for the record. I have a question and a comment, and I just wanted to preface both of those by saying that I'm supportive of this project in general. I think it's important that we reduce barriers to housing production, specifically development in general, and that we strive to find better balance between the requirements and the activity that we need. My question, and hopefully this isn't too much of a surprise because I asked a similar question a couple weeks ago at the officers meeting. Why is it called the Code Alignment Project? These feel like just 4 different things that we're doing in 4 different chapters. And why doesn't the project page or the objectives reflect what this really is, which is a temporary pause on street tree requirements for existing projects and a temporary freeze on non-conforming upgrades? Because I feel like we just got to come out and just say it, so people can understand what things are about.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe Mika can help me with this one. We're a little bit at the mercy of the evolution of time. When we started this project, it was, as Mika explained, we started with a number of code conflicts. We were looking at alignment across titles. That is still the objective of this proposal. The specific of the proposal, the focus of this proposal is a suspension on those upgrade requirements in service of trying to come up with a more permanent, long-term, aligned set of upgrade requirements. So had we started knowing where we were going to be at Planning Commission today, we might have renamed it. But it sort of was in response to changing conditions as the project was evolving. That said, this isn't really intended to be a one-and-done sort of proposal. And sort of in thinking about that, I think we might have named this also the Code Alignment Program. So it was an ongoing, more intended to be an ongoing vehicle-like recap to evaluate across these titles for different proposals. We are in this moment, however, today, where we're looking at providing this sort of short-term relief while we figure out the long-term alignment solution. So that's the answer to question number 1. We took a look at the website information, and we created an additional article explanation news item that sort of highlights what this specific proposal is about and kind of gets to the meat of the matter, which is suspension of these 4 upgrade requirements. But it was added as a news item versus being on the project background. So, anything to add?
Yes, thanks, Morgan. That was really good. I just want to build on that and to say that we appreciated the comment and the feedback on the website. We developed a website in the beginning of the project, and it does need to be updated. We went in and tried to make some additional updates just to the website and realized that there really needs to be a more comprehensive update to that. So as a stopgap measure, like Morgan said, what we decided to do was create another news article with that proposal and push that out in two avenues. One was using an existing listserv for an email distribution, and then we also added it to the BPS flyer. I totally understand that things can get lost in news articles, but we are working with our comms people right now to make sure that our website is updated and current, definitely in the short term before this goes to council, because we will be receiving public testimony on Title 17 and Title 24 at the city council hearing. I would also like to add that the Title 17 proposed amendments, the Title 17 code itself will likely, currently looks like it would only have a small set of changes. The requirements primarily live in an administrative rule. So both of those code thresholds that Morgan talked about, the significant alterations threshold and the trip increases, live in an administrative rule, just to further complicate things. There will be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on proposed changes to that administrative rule. The objective is to make sure that that administrative rule and the code amendments all move forward simultaneously and have the same effective date. So there will be public notice when that administrative rule proposed changes come out.
Great. Well, thank you for all of that additional information. That's really helpful to hear. Like one of the first slides that you put up for us today, it was like a sentence about like temporary suspension. I'm like, yeah, that's great. And it's understandable that things evolve over time. I think that having like website materials and things updated and as aligned as possible before testimony opportunities is particularly helpful. My general comment, and you can respond to this if you want. We've had a number of these sorts of projects come to us of a theme, reducing barriers to development. And the name of this one, like the Code Alignment Project, I'm like, oh, it's going to go from like 3,782 pages across 4 chapters to like 500 pages. It's going to be amazing. Chris Smith, he alluded to this too, just kind of the piecemeal nature of these things based on our, like the work plan and the look ahead for the rest of the year. I don't think that there is like the behemoth like project to really like look at what we can do to simplify things and find more alignment, make it easier to navigate, eliminate surprises. I think that we should do that. I think that it would result in better outcomes than trying to just take these tiny little surgical things. While not invaluable, I don't sometimes know how much they're doing in and of themselves.
I love that statement. Especially getting down to 500 pages. I think what this project is really doing is beta testing. This is a new way of bureaus working together to get cross-code changes move forward through a new form of government. So it's actually tackling 2 different kind of organizational challenges at the same time. But it's also kind of plowing that course forward a bit. So we're learning as we're going how to best do that. And one of the things we're learning about is how do you message this project? Who do you send the public to? Planning Commission for this, Urban Forestry Commission for that, Council Committee for this, an admin rule process for that. That's something I think we also need to be paying a little more attention to and improving as we're going, which the next round, should there be one, we hope to bring a little more substantive type of actual code alignment.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. I just want to maybe elaborate a little bit on what staff has said and say that it is true. I can understand the perspective of the commission of seeing these projects kind of, come in, tackling just pieces of the puzzle at a time. As you know, oftentimes what this commission is seeing are changes to the zoning code, right? Because that is, Title 33 is the code that this commission has purview over. And oftentimes, each bureau is updating their codes in isolation. So I think what Mika and Morgan are describing is a recognition through the permit streamlining efforts and the, looking at development review times and things like that to recognize that provisions really need to be looked at, regulations need to be looked at across codes. And this is kind of beginning to put an infrastructure in place to do that. And the other thing that I want to make sure that commissioners understand is actually that this work doesn't have long-term resources. So this work has been funded by limited term, one-time funding for a while. And so another important aspect to this is just if this is a direction that the city wants to go, that there really needs to be more resources allocated to this effort. And so what you're seeing is a team that's trying to do what it can with existing resources and within timeframes that were outlined for staff, the objectives to get this project complete, which in some ways is tied to the resources, quite honestly. So there's a lot of different things going on here. Just, I wanted to give you a little bit more of that picture.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Just the last thing I'd say is that I think it's difficult for people to track what the implications are at the macro level when you have things that are coming in a bunch of different packages. I think a lot of people might agree that some level of bike infrastructure support is important. And when we just have like our blinders on and we're looking at this piece over here, it's like, well, sure, that seems reasonable if we pause this or if we get rid of this requirement over here. And then, you step back and it's like, oh, that now we're not in alignment anymore. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Other questions? Commissioner Spivak.
I guess I'm going to the big picture now. It feels like each of these projects, the regulatory relief project and this one, are sort of calling for updates in a certain amount of time that's unfunded. And I have a little anxiety about, are these the big plays we should be putting our staff time on? In some ways, these are just like moving around the chairs on the deck. There's slight improvements, but there's some housing production strategy. There's some big plays there. There's, I think, massive code simplification would be a big play. And so we're not necessarily the body that does this, but I feel a little bit like, are we, in terms of applying staff resources, maybe we should focus on where do we get the biggest bang for our staff buck? And sometimes these little projects, as much as they help the code, might not be that, I wonder.
Thank you. Other thoughts? I have a few questions because we had a couple of late-breaking pieces of testimony come in, and the one from the Port of Portland specifically I did not understand. So this is my ignorance showing around if there is a renovation of a smaller amount on a smaller parcel, but that the contiguous parcels are owned. Could you help me?
I think it's a definitional situation. In Title 33, we define a site as contiguous ownership. So it's not necessarily limited to a tax lot, for example. And so larger institutional owners that have multiple properties may be making, or one of their tenants may be making changes in one place. But the definition of site means that the entirety of all of that contiguous ownership has to be evaluated for that non-conforming upgrade. And there's still a 10% cap that comes into play, but just asking that question, what's in conformance or not, someone has to do that analysis for the entirety of the entire site. So that a bigger landholder like the port, that's especially vexing, I imagine.
Thank you. I guess my coring, I think on the balance, I really appreciate your comments so far and appreciate the import and what this project is working to do. My small, and I thank you for using the term anxiety previously, so I can add to it, is around loss avoidance. Around as we are beta testing, we had the use cases that we had here were interior. So looking for street trees or pedestrian infrastructure seems like there is no. We are not creating any barriers to that in future. We could potentially be creating a barrier to bike parking if it is an interior and there's interior bike parking, right? So I guess the question: Are there? How are we thinking? Because pedestrian throughways and are kind of a once in a. It's a one and done. If you are creating something that could create a barrier, you don't get that pedestrian infrastructure later, right? So there is a loss going forward that even though we're beta testing over the course of these few years, that is an enduring outcome, right? Whereas like an exterior, I think that we could be considering it. So I'm curious, are there use cases that you have seen that are exterior that could preempt future tree creation or pedestrian that we should be mindful of? Thank you.
So it's, if I can translate, maybe
Yeah,
for
thank
my
you.
my own benefit. It sounds like you're speaking about what is the opportunity cost of not requiring these things today? What are we losing in the, I guess, mid to long-term future? And this same conversation came up during our Urban Forestry Commission, so I'll have Dan sort of speak to that a little bit on the on-site tree potential impacts. But by way of consideration, in terms of the long-term outlook, the upgrade requirements, some version of the upgrade requirements will apply again after 2029. And when those sites come in for some level of redevelopment, those requirements will get applied at that time. So there's a moment, a period of loss where we don't have that improvement. But over the, we are in the long play business, it's long range planning. So there's that to consider. And I think ultimately that very question comes down to this balance. If we are providing for some form of economic relief, then the project will move forward and we get some level of improvements, whether they're improvements to the building, the assessed value, the new store opening up, new business operating. Those are good things also. And we're making the decision, if we do make the decision, to suspend this other thing for a period of time. So it's that balance that we're asking for.
One of the factors that we've been really trying to take into careful consideration, specifically looking at the street tree element of it, is shifting kind of the culture of how we're getting street trees put into the ground. Classically, we didn't have a lot of resources, so we looked at different mechanisms, including development, as a means to get more canopy in. As I noted in the slides, we're increasing the city's capacity to plant street trees. But what that really means then is the importance of, in development, not necessarily having the trees planted, but not losing the planting opportunities that could go through how the frontage is designed. That's why when we're looking at it, we're not just doing a blanket statement over additions, alterations, but we're still requiring street trees to be planted in situations where the right-of-way is being reconfigured and improved through a PBOT permit. So we're really trying to design this in a manner that even if the planting does not fall onto the applicant who might be doing the development, later on through a different mechanism, those sites could still be planted up to get the benefits associated with it.
Please, Mr. Thompson.
Erica Thompson, for the record. I just wanted to quickly clarify when the conformance would be triggered. So existing development would be that these requirements are suspended regardless of project value. If you're adding new footprint or gross square footage, do the requirements apply just to that area, or how does that work
You mean under current requirements or under this proposal?
under the proposal?
Yeah, so the upgrade requirements would not apply unilaterally for additions, alterations, so they would, basically, they don't apply. The only circumstance where you would see these things being applied, in this case of an addition, because bike parking is related to amount of square feet. So if you had, I'm really bad with math here, 9,000 square feet and you had to have 6 bike parking spaces and you were adding 3,000 square feet, you would have to add 2 more bike parking spaces to make up for that additional square footage. But it's not an upgrade, you're just meeting the development requirements. A little bit different.
Okay, yeah, I think I was trying to like tease out the maximum version of what could happen. Like you showed us these small project examples, the basement and the daycare, and it's like, what's the most that could happen and what are we missing out on? And for me, the biggest concern is the public right of way, because I think that with the triggered upgrades, not all things are created equal. Like you can go back and put in street trees, you can find a provision for bike parking at a later date in the building, but redoing the entire sidewalk, for example, to make it barrier-free or aligned to accessibility, that would probably be less likely to happen. And so if you could just kind of talk through like that side of the spectrum, that would be helpful.
Well, let's see, if we're talking about a major remodel, I'm gonna just make something up. So imagine there's a very large hospital on the hill, and they're adding a new building. So the non-conforming upgrades that currently apply would have us look at the entire institutional campus, identify if there's substandard in bike parking and pedestrian linkages and all that stuff for the entire site. And what we're missing out on in this period of time is whatever level of upgrade would be required based on the project value. In terms of the street improvement side, just stepping into Title 17 for a minute, if that addition, well, there wouldn't be a change. If that addition was increasing the trips on the site, there would already be requirements that are applied to improve the frontage along that particular project. And in the case of our proposal, we are continuing to apply those types of upgrades, even if there aren't trip generations, because the use is an institutional use like a hospital or school, where the need for sort of the pedestrian safety is heightened more so than kind of general other types of uses. So to answer the Title 33 question, depending on the extent of the project, the size of the site, this opportunity cost could be small. It could be nothing because the site already conforms, to rather extensive because they're doing a lot of improvements and the site is very large and they're very substandard.
Can I perhaps offer, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that answers it, yeah, thank you.
I maybe just, Patricia Diefender, for the record, just to point to a couple things that was in the presentation, the slide 14, I don't know if we want to show it again, but it lists the kinds of things that from a Title 33 perspective are the things that would be required as upgrades. And those are landscaping and trees, and this is all on site, right? Maureen, correct me. So what we might be foregoing in the near term is upgrades that include landscaping and trees on site, pedestrian circulation on site, but not off site, right? Bicycle parking, long-term and short-terms, and then screening of mechanical equipment. And I don't really know what the paving is, but paving and parking and storage. Okay. So I think that, and I would venture to say that right now, given the level of development activity we're seeing in general, that probably the projects that would have triggered non-conforming upgrades are probably going to be more interior, like tenant improvements, more so than anything. And again, pointing to the presentation, just pointing out that the team went back and looked at the number of permits that might be, or projects that might be, if you look back, what that could mean in terms of what would be affected going forward. And they identified maybe 70 sites per year, so a total of 200 sites, over this period of 4 whatever years it is. So I think that by and large, considering all of those things, what we're foregoing should be pretty modest in relation to hopefully what we gain in terms of small businesses opening and activating storefronts and all the other things that you might imagine. So hopefully that's helpful.
Maybe one more fine point, because I appreciate the look back at the data. One thing to sort of explain in those numbers, 70 sites is the number that were valued above the $356,000 mark. But we didn't go into those 400 permits to identify if they were substandard in meeting one of these requirements, or any other number of considerations. They have a residential use on site, or there's an adjustment that already applies to the site. So I think what that number is telling us is there's at least 70 instances where staff's going to go, okay, time out. We need to ask the applicants for some more information here, and that puts a delay on their review. I think what we've heard from PP&D staff is the non-conforming upgrade requirement gets triggered maybe half of that time. So.
Commissioner Lang? And then
Yeah,
I'd like to
this
pause.
is more comment, I guess. And I know when I stepped on this council a couple years ago, the priority was housing. Priority still is housing. We're in a housing emergency. But I want to recognize that this is a big help to commercial buildings as well. And at a time in Portland when we're seeing businesses leave Portland and we're seeing office buildings being sold below what they were built for 45 years ago, or actually handing the keys back over to a lender and walking away from it. These kind of things can certainly help those building owners do those projects without those surprise costs and the delays that they are fighting through to get tenants back in their building. And so I applaud this. I think this is great. I wish we could have done it 5 years ago when this thing started sliding on us, but I'm really all for it. Thank you for all the work you did.
Commissioner Ames, and I also want to recognize that we are a little beyond. So after this, I'll want us to see if we are in a position where we can move.
Yeah, and so this seems like an inappropriate time this is kind of a related but unrelated question, or comment. The 10,000 trees a year. I remember when we looked at that, we saw that earlier, and just the concern about being able to plant 27 trees a day for 365 days and then do it year over year over year. I don't know what mechanism that this would present itself in, but the thought that what if the city had developers, what if they basically gave them street trees for free? You create the planting area and then the city comes out and plants as their street trees. It's just another incentive to throw at developers that says, hey, we're all in this together, kind of thing. And then it also helps the city to accomplish their goal of 10,000 a year, which is a lot. Just a comment, probably unrelated to this topic, but.
No, appreciate the comment. And I think where we are right now, we're expected to see a lot of changes, both in the resources to planting and possibly the future for how the individual property owners are connected with street trees. So putting forward ideas about the best way to move forward and also to bridge that gap between development and long-term canopy. I think more ideas, the better at this point.
Thank you. Actually, one last question, if I could, to Chris's question, where can we put bike parking? Because I do feel like the cumulative impacts over the last few years, at some point, it needs to have a home.
Yeah, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. So I know there was the testimony, the suggestion is that should be included in the Recap 11 project. And the Recap 11 project is largely, we're about to publish the discussion draft of that project imminently. So I don't foresee that being in the Recap 11 project, but what we are planning to do and what we did talk about at the time of the housing regulatory relief is to kind of at the midpoint of that period of time in which those regulations were suspended, to really start to look at how did that actually play out in development? Did people take advantage of it? What can we learn from how development took advantage of it? And then use that to consider what the permanent rule should be. So in our estimation, kind of in the spring of 2027 is when we're going to start doing an evaluation of that and a project that would bring forward recommendations as to what the permanent regulations will be in advance of the expiration, the 2029 expiration. So we have in our longer term work plan to address that. It's not going to be in recap 11 because we don't have enough information and we really haven't had the time to evaluate what might be happening in terms of development using those suspensions. So, and we have a full package for the recap 11 package already. There's 50 items in that package already.
Commissioner Spivak?
Well, I look forward to hearing. It sounds like recap 11, it's not in the scope right now. Based on HB 1537, it's impossible to require more than 0.5 space per unit. So even if we were changing the number, it wouldn't make a difference in recap 11. However, I did hear testimony that there are some specific ideas of changing the definitional requirements. And I'll be looking forward to hearing testimony on that. And that might be an amendment to recap 11. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I feel better now. We are a little past time. There was a possibility of a recommendation today. I'm curious if anyone feels comfortable. Okay. Is there language that we could put up so that Vice Chair Thompson can?
To make a motion?
Yeah.
We crafted this all, and
I mean, we can wait until another meeting if you want to come back.
I guess while we're waiting, I did look up Commissioner Lang's question about what was excluded and whether mechanical equipment was included or not in that valuation exclusion. It is not part of the exclusion for street improvements, Title 17 stuff, but it is excluded from the non-conforming upgrades for both the seismic report, Title 24, and our non-conforming upgrades from Title 33.
Thank you. And what raised that question for me is with the building performance standards that are coming into play from the state now, a lot of these buildings will be looking at mechanical improvements that are going to be a high dollar value.
Yeah, well, interesting. Thanks for that tip. There we go. There we go.
All right.
I would like to make a motion that we recommend to City Council the proposed code alignment project draft.
Second.
Okay, and specifically that which amends Title 33, Planning and Zoning, is described in the Code Alignment Project proposed draft.
With that, thank
Great.
you.
And there is a second, Commissioner Ames. Any discussion before we call roll? Okay. Autumn, if you would be so kind.
Commissioner Lang,
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak,
Aye?
Commissioner O'Mara,
Aye.
Chair Routh,
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Alexander,
Aye.
and Commissioner Ames.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. Did we want to talk about transmittal letter now, or did we want to leave that to a future conversation and also feedback on Title 11? I look to you
I
for-
think we should go ahead and do that now if you think we could do that pretty swiftly. I think that would be a good thing to do.
Great. Awesome. What's most important? Vice Chair
I
Thompson?
don't know if it's the Planning Commission's spot to advocate for the resources that may be necessary for ongoing, robust consideration of reduced permit barriers and code challenges. But if others feel like that would be helpful, I would advocate for doing that. And I'm also supportive of, is the feedback to Urban Forestry Commission, is that a separate letter or, okay,
Can I
thanks.
have a procedural question on that?
Can we just explain to the commission, what is the feedback that we are seeking to give to the Urban Forest Commission? Is that just support of the amendment as
Yeah,
proposed?
and just a time sort of check on that. We are going back to their hearing on Thursday. So while we can draft up a formal letter, we're intending on just communicating verbally at that hearing your input before we get it formalized in the letter.
I don't have any specific input other than just general support.
Can I have a process question? I thought that for Title 1150, that we were both recommending bodies to City Council. Is that incorrect?
It is incorrect. It was amended. I'm not sure
Oh, it changed,
exactly
okay.
when, but yeah.
So now we're recommending body to Forestry Commission, and then they're the sole recommending body for all of 11, even the ones in development situations.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Good memory, though.
Oof, yeah. Other things?
I would echo Vice Chair Thompson's comments and just really emphasize that while these are small changes, they are emblematic that we are open for conversation and that there is more conversation to be had. I know I raised seismic in our officers' meeting, and I think that while that's complicated as well, that's one of the biggest barriers that we see for housing preservation of our older housing stock, speaking as a representative of Central City Concern right now. But I think there are many other commercial property owners, businesses, when we talk about office to housing conversion, that's a big piece. So I would just emphasize that, you know, we're all supportive of this smaller package and improvements, but there's definitely more conversation to be had around barriers.
I would love to add to that, that the recognition of the cumulative impacts of some of these for generational, and the importance of looking at when can we look at bike parking? When can we look at the impacts to pedestrian? As the former executive director of Oregon Walks, I care about that a lot. Other things? Okay. Do you have what? Does this seem, Commissioner Alexander? Okay. I'm like, other aspects for Title 11? Any specific feedback? Besides trees are great and our infrastructure? Okay,
I was
thank
just
you.
looking
Yes,
at
please.
Commissioner Ames, and there was an idea there.
Yeah, if we can include the idea, that'd be great. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate mechanism for it, but just an official transmittal of an idea for, you know, the trees are already being paid for out of PSEF, and it may be an opportunity to accomplish a couple of goals with one initiative for new development where there's an impact to the right of way, that maybe the city would plant the street trees instead of the project being burdened with the cost. I mean, it's not huge, but it's sending a signal for sure.
Yes, definitely heard and can communicate that to the right channels.
Great.
Commissioner feedback?
Clarifying, the city with this project would not be requiring the street trees, right? So you're saying you would get the street trees anyway, even with the passage of this project. Is that the concept?
My understanding, it was an idea not directly associated to what is being proposed in our code, but to look to the future to alleviate potential concerns and ideas for how to move forward for canopy increase.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your forbearance, and Tom for your patience. Yeah, thank you all. And we'll Oh, and for those who wish to engage in the broader projects that, parts that include Title 17 and 24, would I assume correctly that people could go to BPS's website and sign up for email updates?
The better avenue, we have a code alignment project website. So I think if you just Google Portland Code Alignment Project, you'll get to that website. And at the bottom, you can sign up for updates. And then part of our ongoing planning updates, we continue to monitor the process for all planning projects. So either our BPS e-news or the Code Alignment Project, you will hear about future opportunities to participate.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Cheers. And with that, we will turn to the revised housing forecast. And Tom Armstrong, thank you very much for your patience and forbearance.
Commissioners, I just want to open this item by reminding the commission this is a briefing, informational briefing. There's no action before the commission related to this. We wanted to just share some developments around the forecasts for housing, how they have changed over time, and what we're doing with that, just for your information.
Thank you.
There we go. Good afternoon. I'm Tom Armstrong, he, him pronouns. I'm a supervising planner here at BPS, and I manage our housing and economic policy team. And with me this afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Ariel Kane, economic planner on Tom's team at BPS.
Ariel and I were the lead planners on the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy, which you saw last year. And during that time that the city was working on our local plans, there were a lot of other things going on, both at Metro and at the state. And so what we're presenting here is work where we're trying to reconcile all of those changes that were going on at the same time, so that we have a sort of a clear picture around expectations for a housing production target. And I said, you know, there were three main things going on: our housing needs analysis here in Portland. At the same time, Metro was updating the urban growth report, which is the regional forecast, as well as an analysis of what the region needs in terms of an urban growth boundary expansion. And then the other thing was that at the state level, they were finalizing the methodology around the Oregon housing needs analysis. And then culminating in January of this year, the Department of Administrative Services is now responsible for doing a forecast and assigning a production target for each city in Oregon that becomes sort of what the state uses as a benchmark. And here it is. The state started, so at the top row, you can see we used, because there was not a new regional forecast available when we were doing our housing needs analysis, we used the previous Metro forecast from 2018. And then we adapted that using the draft ONA methodology that was available at the time to determine our forecasted housing needs out to 2045. While we were going through that process, and especially during the housing production strategy process in 2024, Metro was updating their regional forecast, which the Department of Administrative Services used for their ONA forecasting and allocation to local cities. And so what we're trying to do is reconcile that target production target from the state with what was in our housing needs analysis, because they're vastly different. And I'll explain why. But the ONA target was only 57,000 units out to the year 2045. We adjusted, the initial housing needs analysis had a 120,000 unit target, but that was based starting in 2023, whereas the ONA target starts in 2025. So when we adjust for that, that brings us to about 109,000. And so 109,000 feels a little too much, 57,000 feels a little too low, and we're looking for something in the middle. The reason why the ONA target is so much lower had to do with a number of factors. I think one of the main ones was the regional forecast is for much slower growth than what we have seen. And when you look back to even forecasts that were done in the 90s, regional forecasts that were done in the 90s, we see a gradual trend over time. Metro does this every 6 years. We see that growth slowing over time, but even between 2018 and 2024, you saw much slower, even more decline in the rate of growth. And that results in a 33% lower regional forecast for the region. In addition to that, the ONA allocation makes adjustments to a number of different factors. And for Portland, one of the biggest ones is we essentially get credit for our affordable housing production that we have done recently in the last 10 years. And ONA is looking at a more fair share allocation of that affordable housing need to other jurisdictions in the region. And so how those two main elements come together is, the Metro forecast has 235,000 fewer people in it. And here in this chart, you see a number of different forecasts are the different colored lines and how that curve bends over time. And you sort of work your way down from the top. The top two, you see the 2004, 2009 forecast, and then 14 and 18 are just that next step lower, and the 24 forecast is just that next step lower yet again. The main reason for that is the decline in the birth rate, and this is not only happening in the Portland region; it's happening at the state level, at the national level. So the number of births are declining, whereas with an aging population, even though we're living longer, the number of deaths is going to increase, such that in 2035, we expect that deaths will begin to outnumber the number of births. In the background to this, in the Metro forecast, is an assumption that in-migration to the region will return to historic averages. It's been down recently. Metro included I believe it's around 15,000 people a year coming into the region, and that over time we'll average that out. And so that's why that in-migration still gives us a net growth. It's slower growth, but we are expected to grow. The other factor is this, sort of a fair share allocation of the affordable units. And what that looks like in Portland, what you see on the left here is how our HNA forecast broke out by income levels and how the state forecast, the state allocation breaks out by income levels. So the state is not only assigning each city a total number, but they are breaking that out by income levels. And states are expected to hit their production target by income levels, not just the overall level. And so you can see here the net effect of that fair share allocation is at least in the eyes of the state, a drastically lower responsibility for Portland in those lower income households. How that plays out in the region is really different. And this, what you see here are, again, on the left, are the assumptions that we pulled out of a number of different housing needs analysis done around the region. And what those cities were assuming, sort of in the same position we were, doing our HNAs before these targets came out in January, and what the state is now expecting cities to produce. And you can see how the suburban jurisdictions have a much greater responsibility for producing lower income affordable units. And that's sort of how that fair share plays out. Yes, Steph.
Just a question, does that also correlate to investments or funds that are available to cities within this?
I think it will over time. There's nothing explicit with that. But I'm not clear on like how the state, the Oregon Housing and Community Services Department will adjust their funding formulas. But I would imagine all of these jurisdictions will suddenly be showing up at their door looking for state funds for this. I think it, on the other hand, it also, could, boost the support for another regional housing bond. Because these jurisdictions have seen how that regional housing bond has provided the resources for projects in their communities.
While we're interjecting, this idea of fair share, I'm just not familiar with it. It's like if you build it, they will come versus building where the need is, or?
Yeah, a little bit of that. That it takes more of a regional look at the housing market and what's going on and how people choose housing, and making sure that there is a diversity of communities in each household, but also that you have housing choices, right? That lower income households can choose to live in different communities, can choose to live closer to their jobs and not just sort of go where the housing might be. So there's greater choice, and it just recognizes that we are in sort of a regional market and not just individual jurisdictional market. Are there any, this is a good place to pause because I'm going to turn things over to Ariel to talk about how we're sort of reacting to this change in Portland. But are there any other questions about sort of the regional forecast and sort of how we got there? Otherwise, we'll dive into our work here in Portland and coming up with a revised production target.
Yeah, Vice Chair O'Meara, for the record, thank you so much, Tom, for this update. Going back to the AMI production changes, am I reading that this one, that it's shifting to a production goal around 120% AMI units and above for Portland? So basically, we need to be producing more than we had previously projected for that AMI level, based on the state data. Am I reading that correctly?
As a share, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
A reduction in the 0 to 60
yes.
production goals, and then 11% increase in the 120% AMI.
Right, in the more market
Is
rate
that
units.
tied to vacancy rates? Do you know if the state, does DCLD look at actual vacancy rates in our housing market?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I mean, that there's always a little, and the forecasts for unit needs always can include a little bit of a vacancy factor itself.
Yeah.
but I don't know that they actually look at vacancy by sort of the market segments.
Okay.
Per se.
So they're looking at how many units of those AMI categories have been produced in the past 10 years, or is it really just all future projection based on all that criteria you presented a slide or two before this?
Yeah, Ariel, do you know?
They look at our affordable housing production that we do track as jurisdictions as part of reporting to the state, but it is not reported in the same way for our market rate. So I don't think that they are really accounting for a vacancy within, like as Tom said, within each of these market segments, but they can to some extent with the lower affordability units because those ones are tracked.
Okay.
Commissioners,
Do you have a follow-up? Or?
Do you want to follow up that one?
I just wanted to maybe add something that might be helpful. Patricia Diefender, for the record, I think what you're seeing, particularly in is it the next slide? Could you just go one slide? So what you're seeing is essentially the city of Portland in some ways getting credit for having been proactive about producing affordable housing and the philosophy that every community should be providing and producing housing that is affordable to a wide range of incomes. So in some ways, it's also a recognition that other communities that may not have been as proactive in building affordable housing, it's putting more of that responsibility on those communities. And so I think what you're going to see next about what we're doing with all of this information is that we're still interested as a city from a policy perspective and consistent with our own values to make sure that we're still accommodating housing for people of all incomes and not necessarily skewing as high as this would indicate to just the higher income households. And in part to maintain the diversity that we have now, both, our economic diversity that we have now, and addressing the fact that we have many households that are really significantly cost burdened. So you'll see more of that, but I don't know if that's helpful, but I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. I understand the community goal, the production goals, and completely the rationality behind that in terms of fair share production. I think I was asking about how did they get specifically to the 120% AMI? Is that based on what they're seeing around income growth for the region? Because with the affordable production, that is based on actual how many units have we produced. But it doesn't sound like there's a correlation with the 120%. So I was just wondering, how did they come up with that, as we need to be producing more of that?
We may need to look into the methodology a little bit more to answer that. Yes.
Yeah.
Does the equitable distribution and keeping track of it apply to shelter beds as well?
No, you will see when Ariel talks about this, the ONA methodology assumes or includes a forecast or a projection for housing units to house the houseless. So moving people into permanent housing and not just shelter beds.
Okay. I guess I was getting at, if, let's just say Portland had 100% of the shelter beds for the region and the other jurisdictions had zero, it's not like that, but that's the extreme case, would those other jurisdictions be running afoul of their state targets?
Not through this. This is about housing, not shelter. So, but if they are not also providing those 0 to 30 units to move people out of shelters into permanent housing, then that's where they would run afoul through this ONA program. All right, I'm going to turn things over to Ariel to talk a little bit about the Portland forecast.
Great, thank you. So Tom shared a graph previously that showed the metro population forecasts and how those had differed over time. So I just wanted to, before jumping into the draft revised target that we've been working on, show how our own housing unit target has changed over time as well, especially since 2010 when the 2035 comprehensive plan forecast began. We've had some of our own, which you saw last year as well, or 2 years ago. So this just shows how they've differed. The top two lines show you the two forecasts we previously produced at the City of Portland, and then the third line, that orange line, shows how it compares with that ONA target that the state has produced. When we look at this, we think, based on new information, that our comp plan and our H&A target might be a little too high. The DAS or ONA target might be a little bit too low based on how permitting trends have occurred and what we expect our current need to also be. So we're aspiring towards those realistic targets for our overall production, and so that they sort of meet a middle ground that plans for our current need as well. So on the next slide, we're looking at a revised target just for the City of Portland that still addresses our policy objectives and has a variety of different input considerations. So it starts with that ONA allocation and acknowledges that that's sort of our minimum that the state will hold us to, and that we should be planning for, but also takes into account that JOHS, the Joint Office of Housing Services, has a new by name list, which estimates a higher houseless population than the point in time count, which is used in our previous forecast, but also used in the ONA forecast as well. We also still want to continue to look at where our greatest need for our housed Portlanders are. And so we consider as well our severely cost burden renters, so those who are spending more than 50% of their income on rent. We also are taking into account that, with the ONA target and with taking in additional numbers from our severe cost burden in our houseless population from JOHS, that there's a bit of an overcount, so we've made some adjustments for that. And then, as Patricia mentioned, that we still have a value of maintaining economic diversity and producing housing that meets everyone's needs across different affordability levels. So what that gets us is a revised forecast that's probably somewhere in the middle. Right now, that's about 88,000 housing units that we would want to produce between now and 2045. The light blue shows that low or ONA target, which was about 57,000, broken now into the various income levels. And then the high is that dark blue, that 110 sort of adjusted 120 forecast that we previously had. You'll see the shape of this just looks a little bit different than the ONA forecast, where it does skew heavy on our higher and middle income, and the medium or this revised target balances it out so that we're still looking to meet lower income needs between the 0 and 80% AMI. I'm going to show you our numbers in a couple of different ways. This is just another look at how these numbers compare. That 0 to 80% is where we consider our greatest need for low-income households. So the ONA forecast is saying we expect about 37% of our new housing to be affordable, and our high estimated at 53%. Down the line, everything sort of meets in the middle, and we didn't plan that. That's how the math worked out. So we're still planning for about 40% of our higher income units to be produced, but we do still have that balance in the lower end of the spectrum as well. And then I know that it can be difficult to look at a chart and say, what does AMI mean in terms of our households? Well, it varies by our household size. So I just wanted to provide a chart to sort of demonstrate when we say low income need, what that really means for Portlanders. So that 0 to 80% AMI is really for a single adult. It's between no income up to $69,000 a year. And when we think about a 4-person household, maybe 2 adults, 2 kids, we're saying that's about $0 to $100,000 a year being earned. And those are the folks we would be building for in that 0 to 80% AMI. And then one last slide. Just the target all by itself, around 88,000 units. That's an annual production target over the next 20 years, about 4,400 units. And that lower income need that I mentioned, just reiterating, that's about 37,000 units in total by 2045 that we would be aiming for.
And I think that's what we had for you this afternoon, and we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you both so much. Questions, comments? thoughts about life?
All right.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefenhofer for the record. Just wanted to also maybe note, Tom, I'm sorry if you said this at the beginning and I missed it, but, this is still a work in progress. But we wanted to show you, certainly wanted to make sure you are aware of the much lower projections and kind of how we're interpreting what that means for what the city's objectives will be going forward. So these numbers are still, we're still consulting with other bureaus, Housing Bureau, et cetera. We've done a lot of consultation already, but these are not finalized necessarily, and we also have to figure out what does it mean? What do we have to do with those numbers ultimately? But for now, we just wanted to make sure the commission was aware of these changing trends.
Commissioner Alexander.
Make sure I'm at the right, Mike Alexander for the record. By the time I get it right, I'll be gone. The forecast, I'm assuming, is inclusive of both affordable and market-rate units developing. And I don't know that there's an answer, but I was struck by the fact that the growth rate between, at the higher end of income spectrums was significantly higher. And I don't know if that's credit for work that we're already doing or just our assessment of where this is likely to occur versus where we are directing it to occur.
I think it's a little of both, especially when we get to this Portland sort of distribution of that 88,000 number. But it is being redistributed to maintain our sort of current income diversity as we see in Portland. So I think over, the last 20 years, we've seen a lot more higher income market rate housing being built, and that's shifted the demographics in Portland itself. And so this reflects at least trying to maintain where we're at today or as of 2023 to try and hold on to the income diversity that we have.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Erica Thompson. This is going back a few months ago now, so I hope I'm not misremembering. But when we were looking at the housing needs assessment initially, I feel like I recall that with the exception of maybe some recent years, in general, we were producing about as many units as we thought we needed to each year, or like we were generally tracking. But yet we continue to be dealing with this housing crisis. And so there's always for me been this bit of a gap between where we are, where we need to be, and then what these numbers tell us. And so I guess I'm just, maybe you can validate or not the first part of that. And then just what do we do with or what does the city, we collectively, what do we do with this information versus not,
Yeah. So I think what you're recalling is we do have some graphs that show that our housing production was tracking with the previous forecasts. I think what you see with this new forecast methodology is that those forecasts were not necessarily accounting for, housing the houseless, and some of the historic underproduction, that household formation was happening faster than we were building. So there was a little bit of lag that was contributing to our affordability crisis. And so this methodology is trying to account for that. So not only is it just the population growth, but there's some of that makeup built into these numbers. And so that's what you see here in terms of the methodology change. And the second part of your question
I guess I'm just wondering if this is going to send a message of taking the foot off the gas pedal, or
no, that's actually what we were trying to avoid here, is that if you just go look at the state forecast, right? It's 2,800 units. We can, in good times, in normal economic times, we can probably do that. We don't. But we did not want to leave like that larger, the HNA forecast hanging out there because of the expected demographic change and the slowing of growth. You know, that 6,000 units a year is going to be really hard to achieve. There's not going to be the population, or we don't expect, at least right now, the population demand for that level of growth. That's why we think like the 4,400 units a year is probably a good middle ground that can be our new production target. We're more ambitious than what the state is looking for us to provide, but we think we can do more, and that's what we're going to hold ourselves accountable for. I will say again, with the new state system, right, we're having a check-in with the state every 3 years, and we're having to update all of this every 6 years. So as the growth rates change and the migration patterns change, we're going to be constantly monitoring this and having to do it again.
I guess I'd like to add, in looking at the demographic change, think of income as one component. I also think of accessibility as another, is a big piece of how are we developing, with age comes a higher probability of, or possibility of disability. And so, how our housing production is accommodating targeted and universal accessibility.
Yeah, the HPAS has more sort of detailed breakdown of that need in terms of both sort of accessible housing units and housing for larger households. It's just that the state allocations don't go that deep. They're total number and by income, and that's the high level. But the housing production strategy has that more refined need in there as well, and so that'll continue to be a metric over time.
Great, thank you. And I guess I think of, because we were recently the Economic Opportunity Analysis Collaborative Working Group, the preview of coming attractions of what our institutional land use zone, how that would impact our aging population.
Yeah, and if I could note also, the housing production strategies, we're still being held to moving forward with those. And so we had articulated that higher need of needing age and disability friendly housing. And so those strategies still hold. And myself and Morgan, who you heard from earlier today, are working on a project that will be one of those that addresses housing accessibility as well. So those projects will still continue to move forward.
Any other questions or thoughts? Congratulations, you got us basically back on time. I don't know how you did that. Thank you so much for presenting before us.
Thank you.
And now for our final agenda item, could beg Brandon Spencer Hartle up for the Historic Resources Work Program update. And this also is a briefing, not a hearing, and no action need be taken. Thank you, Brandon. Please take it away.
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners. Give me just a second here to get me logged into the meeting and share my screen.
How about 90-second break?
Nice to have both of you here.
Hopefully one more.
Dream team.
I'm glad you.
Shall we give it a minute? All right, and let's bring it back. Thanks, team. Brandon, it's all you. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Chair Ralph. Commissioners, Brandon Spencer Hartle, he, him pronouns. I serve as the Bureau's Historic Resources Program Manager. And I think I'm sharing my screen, but maybe I'm not. Let's see. Aha, there we go. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. It's been about 2 years since I was last with you during your comprehensive plan training, and I had the opportunity to give the Commission a background on chapters 3 and 4 of the comp plan, which address a variety of items, including historic resources. But I'm back today to give the Commission an update in what the Bureau, I want to say this, the Bureau's responsibilities outside of the zoning code and zoning map as it pertains to historic resource documentation, designation, and protection. And so I'll get us started with sort of a quick overview of the regulatory world, just so we all are speaking the same language, since I know not all of you were here 2 years ago when I joined the Commission the last time, and then really get into what our work looks like out in the community and working to advance our historic resources program collaboratively with other bureaus and with the different geographies and histories of our city. So we're going to talk about historic resources today. And for today's discussion, even though I will walk us through a very brief overview of our regulatory framework for historic preservation, for today, think of historic resources as any interesting old historic place that has some value to somebody here in the community. And I'm going to use that term broadly to mean places that are designated historic landmarks, places that may be eligible for historic landmark designation, and places that may be important to communities that have never gone through an evaluation or designation process. To set us in the context, locally, our colleagues at Portland Permitting Development implement our historic preservation land use regulations. We're not here to talk about that so much today. Our Historic Landmarks Commission, chaired by Andrew Smith and Vice Chair Peggy Moretti, provide quasi-judicial review of alterations and additions to historic resources, as well as makes recommendations to the City Council on proposed demolitions of designated historic resources. They also provide advice and guidance and publish an annual report. I'd be remiss not to mention that the report on the right side of the screen there was released about a month ago, and so for any of you on the Planning Commission who wants to learn a little more about what your colleagues on the Landmarks Commission are up to, that report is available online on their website. Here in City of Portland, each of our public works bureaus are responsible for administering the preservation and management of their historic assets. PBOT's responsible for the Vista Bridge, the Water Bureau is responsible for historic water infrastructure, and so on and so on. But here at BPS, we manage the city's historic resources program, which spans bureaus and spans city functions. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. At the regional and state level, Metro Multnomah County managed their historic assets, including the Willamette River Bridges, Lone Fir Cemetery, and other pioneer cemeteries in the region, and a variety of historic resources that are here in the city of Portland, some of which are subject to our zoning code regulations, some are not. The state maintains a state database of historic resources, as well as state archaeological services, which includes both permitting archaeological responses to inadvertent discoveries, and providing permits and rules for local jurisdictions. DLCD provides guidance on statewide Goal 5, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, that does require local governments to maintain a program to document and preserve historic resources. And then Oregon law provides specificity to public agencies for the preservation of both historic resources and archaeological sites. At the federal level, the Federal National Park Service maintains what's called the National Register of Historic Places, which is one of the backbones of our city historic preservation program, both within the regulatory framework, but within also the incentives and the other technical assistance that we provide. Across the country, historic properties that are in commercial use are eligible for something called the Federal Rehabilitation Tax Credit, which is a 20% income tax credit on historic building rehabilitation. Federal agencies are also required to adhere to something called the National Historic Preservation Act, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes. So what is BPS's Historic Resources Program? This commission in the last handful of years have most often heard from us within the context of our periodic legislative projects to amend Title 33 in the official zoning map as it pertains to designated historic resources, landmarks and districts that have land use regulations applied for their protection. But the program is also responsible for a variety of other topics consistent with other mid and large-sized cities in the U.S. The Bureau maintains what's called the Citywide Historic Resources Inventory, which is the master list of historic properties that have either gone through a designation exercise or that have been documented for their historic, cultural, archaeological significance. The Bureau prepares context statements that detail and evaluate the historic significance of different themes in history, conduct historic resource surveys in the community to document resources that might have the potential for landmark or district status in the future. And on occasion, we prepare individual site nominations for individual landmark designation, which I'll talk more about in a minute. I mentioned earlier the National Register of Historic Places. BPS processes all nominations to list or amend a property in the National Register of Historic Places. And that's something around the magnitude of 10 to 20 of those applications a year that we process that are submitted by community outside of a Title 33 quasi-judicial process. We provide technical assistance to communities and support our Bureau colleagues in achieving city compliance with those state and federal laws I mentioned earlier. And we are 1 FTE staff, so that's why you don't get to hear from us all that often. We do rely, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we rely heavily on limited duration funding, both grants and occasional one-time funds to go out and do additional work beyond maintaining the program. So as a quick background on why we're here today, in 2022, this body recommended to City Council, and City Council adopted a suite of code revisions that we called at the time the Historic Resources Code Project. And that was our once every generation rewrite of our historic resources designation and protection framework. Some of you were on the commission at the time, most of you weren't. And so we thought it's been a few years since we came back to the commission and talked about how are things going, what's the program working on, and how are we advancing some of the work that we couldn't get to at that time and has been on the wish list for a while. So just for background context before we talk about some of the programmatic work that the Bureau is doing, just keep in the back of your mind all designated historic resources, so historic landmarks, conservation landmarks, National Register landmarks, and the historic properties in the corresponding districts, historic districts, conservation districts, and National Register districts, are subject to demolition review, which is a discretionary review that evaluates a variety of different factors in determining whether or not a historic resource can be approved for demolition or not. Conservation resources, conservation districts and landmarks, are subject to objective design standards with a discretionary alternative path for alterations and new construction. And historic landmarks and districts are subject to discretionary historic resource review for alterations and new development. And then significant undesignated resources are subject to an administrative 120-day demolition delay. Here in Oregon, in the city of Portland, owner consent, a majority owner consent is required for landmark and district designation. And I should say, as an aside, for the last 30 years, Oregon has been the only state in the country to require owner consent. Washington State will now soon require owner consent for individual landmark designation. And then the last thing I'll say is our zoning code does provide certain adaptive reuse incentives for individual landmarks and properties and districts. Here's a map of where our designated historic resources are located. We have 718 historic landmarks across the city. These range from places like the Paul Bunyan statue in North Portland to the Pittock Mansion, a variety of single-family, multi-dwelling and commercial buildings throughout the city, as well as structures and public spaces that are both publicly owned and privately owned. 13 conservation landmarks and 32 National Register landmarks. 18 historic districts, some as large as Irvington Historic District, which we could, I'm sure, discuss at length, and some as small as the Portland Zoo Railway and Rocky Butte Scenic Drive. 6 conservation districts and 6 National Register districts. Those National Register districts include Eastmoreland and Laurelhurst, both of which were designated on that National Register of Historic Places since the adoption of the Historic Resource Code project. I'm going to pause briefly because I'm moving us out of zoning code and zoning map world to talk about what the program, what we do day to day and how we collaborate with bureaus and community. But I'll pause there in case anyone does want to ask any clarifying questions about what I hope to leave behind, which is Title 33. Yeah, Commissioner Lang.
Yeah, just one, as you talk about these places, and I'm assuming, is there some that is just land that's designated, or all these the built environment in some way, shape, or form?
That's a great question. There are some that are open space. For example, the Keller, what we call the forecourt fountain, or the Halpern sequence behind us, Portland Parks and Rec facility. There are some structures there, but that is a historic district. Laurelhurst Park is a historic landmark. But in general, our historic areas are more built environment than they are open space. And we'll talk a little bit about how that might change in the future in a couple of slides. Okay, to keep us rolling, and I apologize to Commissioner O'Mara for stealing this photo that I think you took without me giving you attribution, but I couldn't help myself. So I wanted to talk about 5 areas of our work today that go beyond the code and is work that you haven't necessarily seen as regularly as the Historic Landmarks Commission or even City Council in some cases. And then I'll end with my synopsis of what I think we're doing well and where we might learn from other cities. So I mentioned our historic resource inventory, and all of our historic landmarks, historic districts are included on the inventory, but so too are surveyed historic sites. And we have prioritized in recent years using one-time funding to survey additional historic sites, to advance individual landmark nominations for underrepresented sites, and to really listen to community to support owner-supported landmark designations. Since 2020, we've prioritized the designation of 9 African-American historic sites to the National Register of Historic Places. And the property at the right is the Paramount Apartments, which we're currently in the process of nominating to the National Register now. I wanted to spend a minute talking about our LGBTQ+ historic sites project as a case study. We are, I want to say this, I want to provide the right context for this. Actually, maybe I could look to Chair Ralph to help me out here. I know you're interested in this discussion. Would you be so kind as to sort of frame up the Darcel 15 Club to get us going? Because I know you wanted to use that as our launch point.
Oh, I love you very much. I think the frame I think of and why I think it's so important, especially in this moment in our collective history that we're looking at historic resources, is that a city is really about the stories that we tell about ourselves, the stories that we uplift, and acknowledge the histories that we have erased, and to bring them into a place of belonging. And so, like for example, that if you go back to you don't need to, but if you were to go back to the map, there's one, there's a registry. Sorry, this is going a little back behind, if that's okay. But one east of I-205, which is the Jim Pepper House, which is the first, I believe, contemporary Indigenous site that we have. And to your point, Commissioner Lang, that there are stories that are less visible to us because of the histories that we have erased, such as in the Legacy Emmanuel, where we raised so many homes to the ground, and then LGBTQ history that is that there are active efforts afoot to erase LGBTQ history from from important places like Stonewall. And so to have Darcels as I believe the first LGBTQ plus landmark on the historic registry in Oregon, the fourth in the nation, is momentous. And also happy Pride, everyone. Please, Brandon.
So
Thank you.
very
Sorry.
helpful
Thank you.
context. Thank you for letting me rely on your context there. And so we had the privilege of working on the Darcel 15 individual landmark site a few years ago, and we heard from members of the LGBTQ plus communities across the city that they expected more than one individual site designation. And so to respond to that, what we embarked on the last couple of years with a great team of consultants and a great limited duration internal staff support person is a multi-part project to really better understand the city's LGBTQ plus historic landscape, survey historic resources, and then bring forward a suite of National Register landmark designations with owner consent. And so to do that, we drafted and published something called a historic context statement, which is a historic preservation tool that helps evaluate individual historic resources and collections of historic resources within a thematic study area. And in this historic context statement, we looked at 6 areas of the city's LGBTQ plus history going all the way back to 1905 and bringing us through the 1990s to look at areas of history like public health, policing, entrepreneurship, economic development, and created this framework document that could really help us understand the built environment and to evaluate individual sites within their context. So how does one bookstore compared to one bar, or how does a public space in North Portland compare to a public space somewhere else? And to complement that, we conducted a limited historic resource survey where we went out in the field with archival information and historic resource practice to look at 90 properties associated with LGBTQ plus history in the city. And what we learned is that we have somewhere in the vicinity of more than 400 historic sites in the city that have an association with LGBTQ plus history going back at least 30 years. Because of that, we have increased our historic resource survey to an additional 45 properties that we're surveying this spring, documenting both physical characteristics and historic significance, with an eye really towards providing good public information on these properties, just documentation and information that's made available to the public, but also evaluating properties for future historic designations. So which of those 135 properties might be the most appropriate for a future designation, and trying to get that information communicated to both owners and have it available for future parties as well. And then out of that work, we identified 3 especially significant sites, each of which had owners who were quite supportive of seeing their properties added to the National Register of Historic Places, and move forward 3 individual National Register landmark properties, one for the Irvland Field, which is a Portland Parks and Recreation facility in Northeast Portland, the Crystal Hotel in the west end of downtown, and then an HIV/AIDS hospice facility in Southeast Portland, the Juniper House. For each of those, like I mentioned, we had owner consent. And they really rose to the top of the list of a diversity of places that told different stories in LGBTQ plus history. I will mention, because we're out there in the field doing additional survey work now, this is sort of the opportunity for us to find those places that really are deserving of consideration for landmark designation, and to meet with property owners, tenants, and community to evaluate whether or not it's appropriate for the Bureau in the future to use one-time grant money or other resources to move forward a landmark nomination. Changing gears a little bit, one of the potential future work items in the HRCP project was to focus energies on something that people are calling intangible heritage. And so the Commissioner Lang's question, do we have open spaces or non-built environment resources on our historic resource inventory? Very few, but something that has come up from time to time is, can we better invest in the documentation and preservation of things like legacy institutions, businesses, houses of worship, nonprofits that have been around for a long time, that are maybe not located in a building or in a part of town that is necessarily architecturally significant or appropriate for one of our existing historic designations, but may be special and deserving of additional city attention and support in its own right. About 30 cities around the country have adopted legacy business programs. I think something like 24 of those are active today supporting legacy businesses in their community. Legacy businesses meaning they're long-standing older businesses. Some communities say they're 15 years old, others say they're 50 years old. But we were fortunate enough to receive a Small Business Administration grant last year to study the issue for Portland, to get a better sense of our existing stock of legacy businesses, and to try to understand what unique operational and succession planning needs our city's oldest and most public-facing businesses need additional help with. And so we are out working directly with the community to get a sense of what those service offerings might look like. We're working with our colleagues at Prosper Portland and at Portland Permitting Development to complement existing programs. And we intend to bring forward a report very end of this year or early next detailing what potential service offerings might be appropriate for us to consider as a city to help support the longevity of these legacy institutions. And I should say, as we do this work, we have legacy businesses like Powell's that everyone knows about, but we have tried to emphasize businesses that have not received city support in a meaningful way in the past and that represent all the geographies of the city. And so we've been out in East Portland at the Steer Market and North and Northeast Portland talking with barbershops and other personal services businesses to try to get a good handle on not just the most known longstanding businesses, but the ones that maybe are lesser known. Yeah, Commissioner Thompson.
Are any of the building owners that own buildings or places that are significant from a cultural standpoint struggling with the requirements that are then imposed as a result of certification or nomination, rather?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are asking that question of business owners. It's interesting. I should say we have retained Echo Northwest to give us an inventory of what are our city's older, longstanding small businesses. And then we've been working that inventory to get a sense of, are they in a historic building? Are they in a historic district? And I will say there are very few of these legacy businesses that are located in designated historic buildings. This one, Dean's Barbershop, is in a historic building, and the owner, Kim Brown, worked with us several years ago to get that on the National Register to open up the opportunity for tax credits and grants and other things. But so far, we haven't heard from one of those legacy businesses that our historic preservation regulations may be a challenge. We are hearing from those legacy businesses that they may have issues with the use allowances in the zone that they're located. Some of them have been in that building since before we had modern zoning. Some are struggling to find new uses for the property that might be alternate sources of revenue. And so we are learning and taking that information into account. But so far, we haven't heard that our historic regulations are a challenge. That's not to say that they're not, but we haven't heard it yet.
Commissioner Lang.
Yeah, once the recommendations are done and before the report, is there a public input period that happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because this one is not a, we're not proposing any amendments to code at this time. What we're doing is just thinking about service offerings, where we've really been focusing our energy for engagement is with the business owners and their employees. We will have a questionnaire out this summer for broad public distribution to help us think about what could those service offerings look like. But the way we've tried to lead this engagement, since we're not at the point where we would amend the code or we would create a new funding mechanism, has really been focused on those owners and longtime employees to hear from them. What are those challenges? What do they look like? And then working with our colleagues who have done broad-scale public engagement at Prosper Portland to get a better sense of what they've heard before. When the report is out publicly, I think we'll have a good opportunity to go and shop the ideas around. This is back to a little bit circling back to something that Commissioner Lang asked a minute ago. Another area that we've been working over the last several months is in a new state DLCD effort to adopt administrative rules for cultural areas. And this is something that we're especially interested in sort of developing our thinking here in Portland. So Goal 5 of the Land Use Planning Program statewide addresses natural areas, historic resources, and cultural areas. Cultural areas have never been fully defined within our state land use program. And we have been participating in the Rulemaking Advisory Committee down there at DLCD to develop administrative rules that will help cities guide their efforts to consider cultural areas in the planning process. As we understand it today, cultural areas would include both archaeological resources and cultural landscapes that may be both significant to indigenous peoples or to more contemporary demographic groups. Today in our zoning code, we have two areas that are subject to some archaeological resource provisions. One is in the south beach of the Willamette River. The other is in the Columbia South Shore Plan District in Northeast Portland. But this exercise coming out of DLCD has just been giving us the opportunity to think more holistically about how in the future we might be considering archaeological resources, both in our long-term planning decisions, but also in current planning, the current planning framework when archaeological resources may be discovered in a site that's proposed for development, or we might hear from a tribe that there's a known archaeological site on a geography that may be proposed for redevelopment. So this is something we're wrapping our head around. Other cities, I should say, in California and Washington are further along in their thinking around cultural resources than we are. It's something that I've heard from tribal representatives for quite some time that we have work to do. And it's something that I hope we can bring back to this commission once DLCD has adopted the rules and given us the framework for how to have this conversation about what we're doing with cultural resources. A couple of last things here before I get into what I think we're doing well and what we might learn, and then open it up for conversation. In partnership with good work happening at PP&D, Prosper, and the Housing Bureau, we have been thinking about our role in supporting adaptive reuse and where appropriate, office to housing conversion projects. We're currently engaged in a consultant study to identify additional barriers and opportunities for adaptive reuse, both of upper floors and also ground floors of existing buildings, to give us a sense of where we might go further, either within the zoning context or more broadly in advancing adaptive reuse of our larger existing buildings. And one thing that is a positive outcome from our perspective is the legislature adopted and the governor recently signed a renewal of what's called the Special Assessment of Historic Property Program, which is a 10-year property tax benefit for designated historic properties that commit to a minimum rehabilitation plan. And in the past, that program was available to all types of properties, single family, multi-dwelling, commercial. We, in partnership with several other cities and organizations, moved to narrow that program to just be applicable to commercial properties and multi-dwelling structures. And so single-family houses no longer are eligible, but the legislature did renew this program as one of our tools in the toolkit of getting historic buildings adapted and rehabilitated for different uses. And then the last couple of things I want to talk about that I think are exciting. With the new form of government, we had a unique opportunity arise with our partners, first at PBOT and now with the Water Bureau and Bureau of Environmental Services, to try to get a better handle on how the city complies with state and federal historic preservation laws. I mentioned in the earlier slides, both the state and federal government apply a regulatory framework to publicly owned historic resources. This would include archaeological resources, streetcar tracks, cobblestones, public buildings. And to date, we have lacked a centralized compliance coordination function. And that's meant that we've had some unfortunate projects that have fallen through the cracks, federally funded projects, locally funded projects. And in partnership with our other bureaus within the new form of government, we want to make sure that we have crossed our T's and dotted our I's when it comes to historic preservation compliance, and not give an opportunity for us to have a non-compliant situation, or worse, to have us enter into a place where we may inadvertently disturb an archaeological site that's significant to one or more communities. And so something we're going to be advancing this summer is bringing into BPS a compliance coordination function to work with the rest of the bureaus to ensure that we are meeting our requirements and doing it in a way that is collaborative and hopefully in the benefit of both the city and the communities that whose history we touch. So I want to end with what I think we're doing well. I had an opportunity last month to go down to Sacramento, California for the California State Historic Preservation Conference as their out-of-town perspective on a few panels, and I have been to that conference before, but it was an illuminating opportunity for us to think about maybe where we're wanting others to learn from us, and then where we might have some learning to do ourselves. One thing that we have done that most other cities have not is to provide adaptive reuse flexibility to historic resources, and that includes allowing middle housing in designated districts. And we can talk more about that in a few minutes, how it's working or not, or could work better. But in most other cities that are moving to a place of allowing middle housing throughout their cities, they've been a little cautious about allowing it in historic landmarks and historic districts. This is an example. This is the John Mock House currently being converted, I believe, into 3 housing units. We offer, as I showed early in the presentation, a tiered system of protections for different historic resource types. Many other cities default to the one-size-fits-all protection program for individual landmarks and districts, applying discretionary demolition and design reviews to all designated historic resources. And we've worked in the HRCP code amendments to create a tiered approach so that we're not defaulting to the full suite of regulations for every designated historic resource. We're further along than most other mid and large-sized cities with our focus on African American and LGBTQ sites preservation, so I think that's very cool. Other cities are a little further along with recognizing other community groups, something to learn there. And then one thing that strikes me, having spent my entire career here in Oregon, that is different than almost any other large city in the country is that when an application for development comes in, at the time of application, the applicant knows whether or not they have a historic resource or they don't. And most other mid and large sized cities evaluate the significance of an existing property at the time of application. And that leads to conflict, as you can imagine, and it leads to uncertainty. And here, if you have a development project and your property is not a historic landmark or a historic district, we neither provide a mechanism or are legally allowed to provide a mechanism to relitigate whether or not that property ought to be historic at the time of application. And so while I think there's work we can do to provide greater certainty within our historic districts and for individual landmarks, what we don't do is create uncertainty outside of those areas as to whether or not historic preservation regulations will be triggered by a development proposal. And the last thing I'll say, and this is something that we adopted in those HRCP code amendments, we do provide a lengthy list of exemptions from design regulations, both the objective standards and the discretionary path in historic and conservation districts, allowing small exterior alterations and smaller detached accessory structures. Many other cities don't have any exemptions. And so it's commonplace in large cities if you're, for example, adding conduit to the back of the building or coming in for a review. So I think those are some of the things we're doing well here. What I think we can learn from other cities, first and foremost, 39 other states offer a state rehabilitation tax credit for the rehabilitation of historic and or existing commercial properties. And this is something that we don't have here in Oregon. We've never had here in Oregon. But if you look at states like Missouri, New York, Michigan, Georgia, they have these highly successful state programs to encourage private investment in historic properties. And we don't have that here. We're one of only 7 states, I think, that tax income that don't have a historic income tax credit for historic rehabilitation. It's something that's been on my mind for a while. California just recently has adopted a state historic tax credit for rehabilitation, and it's increasingly becoming a cornerstone to how larger cities are thinking about their downtown adaptive reuse and office housing conversion projects. I mentioned, I think 24 other cities have service offerings for legacy businesses. This is becoming an increasingly visible and meaningful part of historic preservation programs in other cities and something that we could learn from. A good example is the city of Denver offers service offerings to designated legacy businesses. We're standing up our coordinated citywide compliance function, as I mentioned, but we've looked to other cities, large and small, from Salem to Seattle, that have existing coordinated compliance functions for historic and cultural resources. Objective design standards for residential historic areas. Our conservation districts have objective design standards, but some of our larger historic districts have a discretionary path. City of San Francisco just adopted a suite of objective design standards for residential development, something we might want to think about back in that code space. And the last couple things that I think are meaningful, while I've been just so privileged to work with communities across the city on individual site designations and surveys, other cities like Austin have developed partnerships with community groups to help set priorities and to establish a stronger plan for where they'll focus historic preservation efforts. And the last thing I'll mention is most other large cities have a comprehensive ongoing citywide historic resource survey and inventory program. And that's something that the Landmarks Commission has identified for quite some time, something I'm interested in. I think it's an area where we might explore taking our small pilot inventory efforts and designation efforts and creating more of a program out of it. So that's what I had for you for today. Okay, I think we have a few minutes for questions or further discussion, but I'm just excited to come and share with you some of our work outside of the zoning code that's been a priority the last couple of years and what we expect, where we expect to go the next year or two.
Yeah. Vice Chair O'Meara and then Commissioner Spivak.
Thank you, Vice Chair O'Meara, for the record. I first want to thank you, Brandon, for being amazing to work with. And thank you for featuring our very recent addition to the National Registry, which is our Golden West Hotel. I'm so happy that you got it into the slideshow. So I did not know that you're a team of one. And I just want to add extra thanks on top of the thanks I already gave, because you
Well,
do
thank
such
you.
great work.
I keep Sandra and Patricia working extra hours to help me build
Thank you
out
for
the team.
helping, Brandon. I am curious, where is the best place to advocate for the state level historic tax credit?
Yeah, that's a great question. This past year, I think our Historic Landmarks Commission has gotten a little more serious about their interest in advocating for this. And I think if that's of interest to this commission, that could be a great conversation for the chair's lunch or for collaboration with them. It is, I wouldn't say it's a top priority, but it has been identified in the city's state legislative agenda as something to think about. And with the renewal of that historic property tax incentive program this session, I think there's a little bit of renewed energy and interest in that. And I'll say the California example is very cool. It was a rare opportunity where California YIMBY and the California Preservation Foundation came together and had a joint agreement on that policy proposal. And I think that's the kind of discussion we need to think about, is beyond just historic preservation. How do we make it work?
Thank you. I might echo the amazing one FTE job you pull off. I just looked back at the letter that the commission sent back when we did the HRCP, and there's 4 recommended follow-up items, and most of them you have been working on, which is awesome. Of course, we don't get to dictate the work plan, but there's one thing on there which you won't be surprised I'll raise to see if it's anywhere on the work plan, which is to selective refinements to the official zoning map to ensure height allowances for new buildings are neither too aggressive nor too conservative in historic districts. And I definitely backed off this when we were doing the HRCP because that project was about the rules of the game. But it's been a few years, so I thought I'd see whether we identified through that project there are some areas where there's big discrepancy between what zoning code allows and what the historic resources, what the discretionary process would end up approving. And I want to see if that's anywhere coming up.
Good question, Commissioner Spivak. We have robust conversations every time we engage in area planning, and as we imagine where we might go with changes to the map for how we find that right balance between preservation and compatibility and opening opportunities for development. There was a bill in the legislature this year that has been amended to not include this, but Senate Bill 49 for a time included a provision that would restrict the city's ability to consider heightened FAR in historic reviews, and it got us thinking again about that action item and how we're doing across the city with respect to the what's on the map and how approvable it might be in a historic context. To pivot a little, one of the recommendations that I think you're pointing to from the HRCP work was to look at the existing designations we have too, and to ask, have we appropriately applied the right protections to the right areas? And seeing what they've done in San Francisco with objective design standards for residential areas has got me thinking again about some of our larger residential areas and how much discretion we're applying and how much opportunity we give for more of an objective process. And so we recently received some consultant recommendations on where we might go with refining our objective design criteria and thinking about the conservation designation maybe as a better fit for some areas that have been subject to discretionary review for some time. But no decisions yet on that. But I think now that we have a couple of years' experience with the new code, it might be a good time for us to start to look at those geographies.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. More specifically, Commissioner Spivak, just wanted to clarify your question. Are you also thinking about some of the conversations that happened with respect to historic districts in Central City? Or were you thinking more of
I got some things in my mind. For example, the north side of Broadway is the south end of the Irvington Historic District. And the north side of Broadway has seen almost no action for decades now, partly because property owners can't deal with the discretionary review. And then maybe more towards the most recent point is that I think the middle housing utilization rate has been relatively low in the historic districts. You correct me if I'm wrong on that because I may be wrong on it. But there is developers tend to like clear and objective standards. So that's the other question, is if there's a clear and objective way of doing something, new homes, then developers have a good reason to try and do it somewhere else.
I'll just maybe add that staff is working on a very kind of targeted central city code amendment in which we are looking at some of the areas that are adjacent to historic districts in the central city. I think, and Brandon can probably explain this, there were some approaches at the time when the plan was adopted and being considered and adopted in 2018 to keep heights at the periphery of historic districts lower for transitional height reasons. But I think in this project, we are looking at a couple of different locations around historic districts and seeing if we can be a little less timid about those edges and consider some greater heights in those areas. So that is something, not exactly maybe what you were talking about, that's something we are looking at through that particular project.
And I think, Commissioner, I think the general discussion that I think that we're having here is there a discrepancy between the approval criteria for new development in historic areas and what the zoning map allows for height and FAR? And in the Central City project, we tried to narrow that gap as much as we could in historic areas like Skidmore Old Town Historic District, Northwest 13th Avenue Historic District, and the Pearl, and to an extent the East Portland Grand Avenue District. And in our last couple of efforts to revise the district-specific design guidelines, we've really worked to get to a place where the guidelines provide a path to achieving the mapped height and FAR. And one of those examples is down in the very small South Portland Historic District under the tram, where we previously had design guidelines that limited new buildings to 3 stories, but we applied the CM2 zone that allowed up to 55 feet or 5 stories in height. And so in revising those guidelines and working with that community, we found a path that would show how you would design a building to maximize FAR and the height allowed on the CM2 zone. I think we have a few areas where it's a question is, do we have the wrong height or do we have the wrong approval criteria? And we may have the wrong approval criteria in some cases. And I looked at our East Portland Grand Avenue, small historic district along the streetcar tracks where we've got heights of 100 and 160 feet, so 10, 16 stories. And those might be the appropriate heights, but we have guidelines that didn't anticipate that type of height. And so when the resources are available, that's an area where we want to take a look, maybe not at suppressing height, but at providing a clear path on how you can achieve that with some design details that create for the compatibility. But I think that there's room for discussion around our larger residential historic districts and asking the question of whether or not applying the most rigorous, I don't know, Autumn, if I can share my screen here, but applying those most rigorous preservation protections to some of those large residential areas now that we have a tiered system of protections with the conservation district and the National Register district type, whether or not some of those areas might be better served through a less rigorous protection program using objective standards rather than the full discretion we apply today. And I think there's some lessons, again, coming out of California cities that we might look to for those residential areas and how to get the standards right.
While we were opening up legislative cans of worms, I think it has been a couple of legislative sessions because we are the only state that has the owner consent law.
We are, and my understanding is that's changing with Washington State. The Washington legislature, I think both houses have passed, and I'm not sure if the governor has signed a bill there that would mirror our law for individual landmark designations.
And could you refresh my memory? I think it was 2 sessions ago, it was Dembro, right, who had introduced a law or a bill that did not end up passing in that perspective, but I'm curious if that's been a conversation.
Yeah, good question. So historic resources are arguably the only area of our statewide land use program where owners have a veto power as to whether or not they're determined to be historic or not. And that's been unique to Oregon for a long time, and part of our approach to policy development that is different. And what that's meant is that has meant here in Portland and around the state, there have been some incredibly important buildings to community that have been demolished without any public review or process. On the flip side, what it's meant is that there is an imperative for us to have a preservation program that works for owners who are convinced of the merits of designation and consent to that designation. That's where we've achieved a high level of success in recent years with individual designations of places like the Jim Pepper House for contemporary jazz music, or for the Dr. John D. Marshall Building, which is the home of the Black Panthers Medical and Dental Clinic on North Williams. And I think that we have this balance with our owner consent law where we have to make sure our regulations are not so onerous that a property owner will never consent. But on the flip side, making sure that we've got a program to protect those places whose owners came around to designation. And I think it's this sort of unique consideration that other cities don't have to contend with, that have both pros and cons. But to date, the legislature has not been willing to revisit that question of should owners have a right to say no to historic designation. I think a little bit it gets to this opportunity we have here with historic preservation that the day you come in for your application for development, you know whether or not you're a historic property subject to the zoning code. And in some ways, that is a opportunity that places like San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Seattle have not offered.
Other last thoughts before we bless and release everyone?
Always a pleasure to join you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the outgoing commissioners. I hope to see you again in less than whatever, it's been 3 years since I was here the last time. So I'll have to find an occasion to come join you.
Thank you for bringing the entire Historic Preservation Department with you. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.